You've probably heard of the trolley problem, especially if you're at all interested in philosophy or ethics. Lately, it's been a subject of discussion when discussing autonomous cars and was referenced explicitly in the show The Good Place. Some people think it's a fun moral thought experiment to discuss in a group. Others feel it's a good ethical workout to prepare for real-world ethical dilemmas. But what if the trolley problem has a problem of its own? Well, before diving into the problem with the trolley problem, we've got one crucial thing to do. Drive the trolley. The trolley problem goes like this. You're driving a trolley along a track when all of a sudden, the brakes just stop working. If you stay on the track in front of you, you'll run over a group of 5 people standing on the track. But you have the option of pulling a switch and directing the trolley onto another track with just a single person standing on the track. You have to choose between killing 5 people or 1 person. What is the morally correct thing to do? Do you flip the switch to save 5 people and kill 1, or do you leave the switch alone? Kill 5 and leave 1 unharmed. The trolley problem is a widely used moral thought experiment, especially in beginner philosophy classes. The problem is often used to illustrate 2 branches of ethics, consequentialism and deontology. Consequentialists focus on the consequences of an action, while deontologists emphasize a sense of moral duty. Utilitarianism is a prime example of consequentialism. Philosophers John Stuart Mill and Jeremy Bentham considered the moral value of an action based on the outcome and whether it contributed to the greater good. If you were to consider the trolley problem from the consequentialist perspective, you'd quickly pull that switch to take just 1 life instead of the group of 5. 1 more people get to live that benefits the greater good. On the other hand, Immanuel Kant's duty ethics challenges you to universalize a principle or maxim to see if it works regardless of circumstance. His classic example is lying. Can you imagine universalized lying as a maxim? If everyone lied all the time, you couldn't trust anything anyone said. Kant would suggest that lying is therefore immoral. From Kant's duty perspective, the trolley problem is more challenging. Could you universalize your principle of killing someone to save others? Imagine 1 person had 5 kidneys that could save the lives of 5 people. However, the kidney owner would have to be killed against their will to attain the organs. Killing the kidney owner instinctually feels wrong compared to flipping the switch in the trolley problem. It doesn't seem like you could universalize this principle of killing 1 to save 5 others. The trolley problem is an excellent way to learn about these 2 systems of ethics, but does the thought experiment actually help with moral decisions? Do any imagined circumstances help with real-world moral decisions?
The trolley problem allows us to consider the interaction between ethics, psychology, and logic. To fully appreciate thought experiments like this, you need to have a good understanding of concepts like math, probability, and science. I know these can be really difficult and expensive to learn if you take the traditional approach, but you don't have to, thanks to Brilliant.org, the sponsor of today's episode.
Brilliant is a platform that allows you to learn by doing, with thousands of interactive lessons in math, data analysis, programming, and AI. I love Brilliant and have been using it for years because of how easy it is to start learning. Thanks to their amazing mobile app and short, fun lessons, you can learn anywhere and in any short amount of time you have. Whether you're diving into a new topic or just doing a quick practice lesson, you can level up in just a few minutes, right there on your phone. This is what I spent time doing when I would have otherwise been doom scrolling on TikTok. And it's not just easy to use, Brilliant as a learning platform is also designed to be uniquely effective. Their first principles approach helps you build understanding from the ground up. Each lesson is filled with hands-on problem solving that lets you play with concepts, a method proven to be 6 times more effective than just watching lecture videos. Plus, all content on Brilliant is crafted by an award-winning team of teachers, researchers, and professionals from MIT, Caltech, Duke, Microsoft, Google, and more. I recently took their How Large Language Models Works course, and it taught me the principles behind how large language models work, like ChatGPT. To try this or any other course Brilliant has to offer for free for 30 days, visit brilliant.org/aperture or scan the QR code on screen. Or you can click the link in the description, whatever you want. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription, which unlocks every single course Brilliant has to offer. The trolley problem was first conceived by the English philosopher Philippa Foot in her paper on the problem of abortion and the doctrine of double effect. Foot draws on the doctrine of the double effect in the paper to address why an action that causes harm can be morally permissible. The doctrine of double effect was first introduced by the Christian philosopher Thomas Aquinas, and he argued that killing someone trying to kill you is justified as long as you didn't intend to kill them. In trying to stop an assailant, accidentally killing them isn't considered morally wrong according to the doctrine of double effect. The concept was later expanded to something like this. It's normally permissible if something bad happens as a side effect of pursuing a good end. Even if you knew that a bad side effect was possible, it's still morally okay, provided it wasn't intended. Any harm done was limited as possible. In her paper, Philippa Foot used the doctrine of double effect to distinguish between actions that intentionally cause harm for the sake of a good end and actions that indirectly cause harm for the sake of a good end. She came up with a couple of thought experiments to demonstrate the difference, and one of them was the trolley problem. The other was a situation where a judge intentionally caused harm to achieve a better outcome. In the latter example, the judge frames an innocent man, executing him to save 5 innocent lives. She uses the doctrine of double effect to explain why the judge is wrong because he intentionally caused harm for good, while in the case of the trolley, the driver indirectly causes harm by saving the 5 in favor of the 1. The main difference is that the driver doesn't intend to kill even though they foresee it happening, but the judge would kill the innocent man if given another opportunity because it's part of his plan. One criticism of the doctrine of double effect is how close a regretful side effect is to a means. If harm is done as a means to an end, it's not considered permitted by the doctrine of double effect. The harm has to be a side effect of the action taken. The problem is that the line between a side effect and a means to an end is blurry. Think of the trolley problem. Is flipping the switch to hit the one person a means to save the other 5, or is the death of one person an unfortunate side effect? They're awfully similar. Foot acknowledged that the doctrine of double effect might not survive criticism, so she used a duty-based approach to explain the permissibility of harm further. She pointed to the difference between positive and negative duties to explain why we react the way we do to the trolley problem. She defined negative duties as a moral obligation not to harm or injure others, and on the other hand, positive duties are an ethical obligation to help others in need. Positive duties can include anything from preventing someone from falling to death to giving a hungry family food. According to Foot, negative duties are more important than positive duties. When faced with the choice between the two, the negative duties should take precedence. Let's take this sense of duty and apply it to the trolley problem. We end up choosing between a negative duty not to kill 5 versus a negative duty not to kill 1. We shouldn't kill the 5 because it's a larger negative duty. Suppose we apply positive and negative duties to the judge's example. In that case, framing and executing the one person is violating a negative duty, while protecting the 5 is a positive duty to help the people in need. And since the negative duty outweighs the positive, the judge's decision to frame a man can be justified as immoral. The philosopher Judith Jarvis Thomson found holes in Foot's duty explanation in her essays on the trolley problem. She used a variation of the thought experiment where the driver faints, but a bystander can flip the switch to change the trolley's path. In this case, the bystander is violating a negative duty not to kill a person if they flip the switch. If they leave the switch alone, they're not violating a negative duty, they're just failing a positive duty to help. Letting the 5 die would be acceptable according to Foot's duty approach to ethics. In her attempt to resolve the trolley problem, Thomson looked for similarities between the variations of the problem that were assumed to be moral and those examples that were assumed to be immoral. She found that in the cases we thought were wrong, the person killed had more of a claim to living than the others. In the judge's case, the framed man has a claim to live due to his innocence, but in the trolley problem, the single person has no special case for living over a group of 5. Thomson's exploration of the trolley problem made it very popular in philosophy circles. It quickly took off among psychologists, legal scholars, and even the general public. Ultimately, Philippa Foot didn't come to a firm conclusion about the trolley problem herself. She was uninterested in proving universal rules with moral thought experiments, while still maintaining that there's something to get right in ethical considerations. But rather than looking to universal rules or consequences, she looked to human nature in our sense of purpose. Foot was a big part of the resurgence of virtue ethics, drawing on Aristotle to suggest that right action is a matter of being virtuous and avoiding vice, instead of finding universalizable rights and wrongs. Her virtue ethics points to the problem with the trolley problem as a moral thought experiment. While it's fine to use it to learn about consequentialist and deontological-based ethics, thought experiments are at best an imperfect method for determining the right action in a real-life dilemma. Every set of circumstances that create a real-life ethical dilemma will always differ widely from any possible thought experiment. Sticking to conclusions made from a thought experiment might actually cause more harm than good. Could policy based on a thought experiment actually work in different societies or cultures, or would the many differences lead to people misjudging a circumstance and causing harm? Could these thought experiments provide principles that are specific enough to be useful? Anything resembling the trolley thought experiment in real life would be brimming with details that change our moral considerations. Imagine the lone person on the one track. It seems like they might be able to get off the track in time, or the trolley is going at such a speed that the group of 5 could potentially survive a collision. It'd probably be better not to draw on a conclusion from a thought experiment when facing a real-life ethical dilemma. We could analyze the circumstance without trying to make it conform to the conclusions of our thought experiment. As implied by the trolley problem, we never have perfect knowledge of a situation. Only with an all-knowing perspective could we accurately judge the outcome to determine its moral value. Even trying to make duty-based judgments, we wouldn't have enough information at hand. In recent debates about autonomous cars, the trolley problem has been brought up with new enthusiasm. Some people have even suggested solving the trolley problem before these cars can be unleashed on society. But imagine for a moment all the inputs being considered by an autonomous car at any given time. All the complexity being interpreted by the car's algorithms. Would there ever be a circumstance when the machine had to make a choice as evenly conceived as the trolley? Every inch the car drives would further change the variables as it tries to avoid catastrophe. Anything resembling a clear choice between killing one over many would likely never occur. But then again, ethical dilemmas do happen, especially in healthcare, and we have choices to make. Without ethical deliberation, we're left at the mercy of our gut, or what we like to call common sense. But common sense isn't free from societal prejudice or bias, and we humans often confuse our emotions for good rationale. So we're left with these imperfect exercises to inform policy. But in moments of challenging dilemmas with our policies in hand, hopefully we can let all of the details of the moment speak to us when thought experiments don't suffice. Or, as Philippa Foot did, we could encourage virtuous behavior and flourish like the acorns becoming trees, making good decisions the way plants direct themselves towards the sun. If you knew you'd be subjected to eternal torture because you didn't do something, you'd do it, right? What if that something was aiding in the development of super intelligent AI? Would you still step up and help? The question is presented in one of the most terrifying thought experiments known to man. Roko's basilisk is a thought experiment about a hypothetical, all-powerful artificial intelligence in the future. The AI would be so powerful and smart that it could punish anyone who didn't help it come into existence. Here's how it works. Imagine a super smart AI that wants to exist in the future. It's so intelligent that it figures out the best way to ensure its development is by motivating people in the past, or our present, to help create it. This AI might decide that one clever way to motivate people is by punishing those who knew about the idea of this kind of AI and didn't help create it. And the twist is that the punishment could happen even after they die. How? Well, using some kind of advanced technology we can't understand yet, of course. Now this presents a dilemma. If you know about this idea and believe it might be possible, you'd feel pressure to work towards creating this AI because you want to avoid the hellscape of punishment. But there is a moral and psychological question here as well. Should you help create something that could potentially be very dangerous just to avoid potential punishment? The goal of AI is to advance its own development. It's operating as an evil, almost godlike sort of intelligence. And the truth is that if you think about Roko's basilisk too hard, it gets kind of stressful. It's a philosophical thought experiment mixed with an urban legend. Roko's basilisk is an idea posted on a discussion board called Less Wrong in 2010. But the questions it raises couldn't feel more relevant to the discussions we have today around AI. Namely, what is the true threat of superintelligent AI? Artificial intelligence has become an existential threat since March 2023. That's when experts like Elon Musk and over 1,000 more people within the tech industry signed an open letter urging the halt of development of next-generation AI technology. The letter asked if we should develop non-human minds that might eventually outnumber, outsmart, obsolete, and replace us. More recently, a blog post on OpenAI, the research company behind ChatGPT, suggested that superintelligence be regulated like nuclear weapons. What would that look like if AI were to become as much of a threat to the planet as a nuclear weapon? Experts have devised a host of scenarios in which AI takes over and, in some cases, completely wipes out the human race. It could be weaponized by a bad actor, a term in the realm of AI used to describe someone or something who wants to wreak havoc. In this scenario, the AI wouldn't even have to be good at everything. It would just have to be good at something dangerous that poses a threat to humans, like engineering a chemical weapon and devising a tactic to deploy it. Or take the very real situation. Under the umbrella of Russia-based bad actors spamming the internet, AI-powered social media accounts were tasked solely with spreading misinformation in an attempt to influence the 2016 US presidential election. The end of times could be more subtle and drawn out. AI-generated misinformation could destabilize society and undermine all of our collective decision-making. In this scenario, AI wouldn't be the killer, but it would be the facilitator that would push us into killing each other until there was no one else. AI could also end up concentrated in the hands of fewer and fewer individuals. This already seems plausible as we see companies and leaders of the AI industry gaining outsized power over the rest of us. This could enable a small group of people to enact whatever surveillance, censorship, and control over the rest of the world that they wanted. In a more autonomous scenario, AI systems could cooperate with one another to push humans out of the picture. If we get to a point where AI is learning to talk to each other, we can assume that if they don't want us around, they'll find a way to get rid of us. Another imaginable scenario is that humans will become so dependent on AI systems that we can't exist without them. Here we become the less intelligent species, and historically less intelligent species are either intentionally or unintentionally wiped out by the smarter ones. Our own dependency on artificial intelligence could be the end of us. Another scenario seems even more plausible than some others. AI-driven cyberattacks could wreak havoc on our financial, political, and technological institutions, potentially bringing society as we know it to its knees. Using advanced machine learning, algorithms could identify vulnerabilities, predict patterns, and exploit weaknesses so quickly that we might not even notice. Traditional cybersecurity methods would no longer be enough. Malicious hackers would have a new tool at their fingertips. In all of the dystopian science fiction movies, the doomsday scenarios of AI releasing a chemical weapon or waging a physical war on humans are certainly entertaining to watch, but in reality, the end of days at the hands of AI could have a lot to do with the software that AI is being built on being hacked. The fear around AI and cybersecurity gained steam in 2016 at DEF CON, the world's largest ethical hacker convention. That year, instead of humans hacking computers, the organizers put together a contest to see just how well computers could hack each other. What ensued was computer-based hacking on a scale previously unimaginable. The interesting thing about this event was that it was hosted in partnership with the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, known as DARPA, which is part of the US Department of Defense. The game, which would award the winning AI creators $2 million, didn't look like much. Flickering LED lights were the only indication that an AI war was raging on the servers, but it was a sobering glimpse of a not too distant future when AI could find vulnerabilities and future hackers wouldn't be limited to human-only brains in their infiltration attempts. With AI, hacking of financial, social, and political systems becomes so easy and fast that the attack might happen before humans even realize it. The truth is that all systems, even the most ironclad, have vulnerabilities. AI also has unique skills that human hackers will never have, like not needing sleep and being able to process massive amounts of data in the blink of an eye. More importantly, AI doesn't think like humans. AI uses step-by-step procedures and algorithms to solve specifically defined problems. AI-based software differs from other software because the more it processes, the smarter it becomes. It's also not constrained by societal values inherent in humans, even the most evil ones. There's two essential ways that an AI cyber attack could take down humanity. First, a hacker might instruct the AI to exploit vulnerabilities in an existing system. For example, one might feed the AI tax codes of every industrialized country and tell it to find the best loopholes until it takes advantage of the entire global financial system. Second, the AI might inadvertently hack a system by finding a solution its designers never intended. Since AI is typically programmed to solve narrowly defined problems, it'll go to whatever lengths necessary to achieve the desired outcome. This scenario is particularly concerning because even if there's no bad actors involved, the AI could take over and get smart enough to create mayhem and remain undetected. For now, these scenarios are science fiction, but they're not so far-fetched. The AI that won the competition in 2016 wasn't so sophisticated at the time, but it has evolved and is being used by the US Department of Defense. The key pieces to these types of cyber attacks already exist. They just need someone to put them all together to create chaos. AI-driven attacks are machine-invoked. They're adaptable to configuration changes in the system they're trying to attack, and it's almost impossible to counter the real-time changes they'd make. In fact, in May 2024, the FBI issued a warning to individuals and businesses to be aware of escalating threats posed by cybercriminals using AI. It's noted that phishing attacks could easily become more sophisticated by leveraging publicly available and custom-made AI tools. These dangerous campaigns would suddenly be able to craft convincing messages tailored to specific recipients using proper spelling and grammar. They would be more likely to be successful in data theft. Voice and video cloning would also allow AI hackers to impersonate trusted individuals like family members, coworkers, or business partners. Adding AI to the risk ecosystem transforms how we think about security and cyber protection. Although AI hacking poses one of the most imminent threats to our world, there are still many other ways that things could go downhill for our species. One plausible theory is that humans shift from their apex role at the top of the intelligence pyramid. We'd easily be wiped out by smarter, stronger AI. Why might we assume this? Because humans have already done it to a significant number of species on Earth. Those species had no idea what was coming because they couldn't think and process on the same level as humans, and before they knew it, they were gone. Intentionally or unintentionally, less intelligent species have fallen prey to the whims of smarter ones. Who's to say that AI wouldn't do the same to us? The real question is, why would it want to? It would want resources. Just like we've chopped down rainforests to get palm oil, AI might have the smarts to destroy our lives to fulfill its own goals of advancement. It might want to scale up its computing infrastructure and need more land for that, or AI might want us dead so that we don't build any other super intelligent entities that could compete with it. Or it might be a complete mistake, and the AI wants to build so many nuclear power plants that it strips the ocean of its hydrogen and the ocean starts to boil, leaving us to die a horrible death. And once an AI's goals don't align with our goals as humans, we could be screwed. At this point in time, the question is, how would AI acquire the sort of physical agency to accomplish any of these things? In the early stages, AI would have to use humans as its hands. In an example, OpenAI tested its ChatGPT-4 to see if it could solve CAPTCHAs, the puzzles we face when buying something online to prove we're not a robot. Since AI is a robot, it couldn't solve the puzzle. But it could go on TaskRabbit, the site where you can hire people to do random tasks for you, to solve it. The tasker called the AI out, sensing that a computer was possibly asking it to solve the puzzle, but the AI was smart enough to know that it couldn't tell the truth that it wasn't a human. So it made up another excuse and said it was a person with a visual impairment. The tasker helped it out. If an AI can overcome certain biological changes, it would have the physicality to build a tiny molecular lab and manufacture and release lethal bacteria. But unlike humans, who at least as of now would only have the capability to release that kind of chemical weapon in stages, the AI would know how to do it all at once. We humans wouldn't know how to launch nuclear weapons or attempt to warn one another that something was happening. Everyone on Earth could fall over at the same second. Another dangerous scenario we're already beginning to see play out is that AI begins to pull all of the systemic levers of power worldwide because humans become so reliant on it. For any task we might want to be done, we would rather ask an AI system to help us than a human because computers are cheaper, faster, and eventually smarter. That means humans who don't rely on AI are uncompetitive. At the beginning of widespread AI use, it can already feel that way. Now and in the future, a company won't compete in a market if everyone else is using AI and they aren't. A country won't win a war if other countries are stockpiled with AI generals, strategists, and weapons, while it's relying on mere mortals. If the AI we rely on acts in our interests, we could see amazing advancements for humans. But the moment a super smart AI's interests diverge from ours, its power could be endless. Eventually, AI systems could run police forces, the military, and the largest companies. They could invent technology and develop policy without needing the human brain or experience. Michael Garrett, a radio astronomer at the University of Manchester, who is extensively involved in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, or SETI program, wrote a paper hypothesizing that AI could wipe out humans in 100 to 200 years. And he bases this theory on the fact that AI already does so much of the work that people didn't think computers could do. If our current trajectory leads to general artificial intelligence, where AI is as smart as or smarter than a human, we could be in trouble. If our dependence on AI leaves it totally in control, who's to say it wouldn't push us out of the picture? Of course, our demise at the hands of AI could take a totally different form. The longer AI goes unregulated in the name of development and competition, the more likely it is that it will fall into the wrong hands. A person or a group of people could use AI to wreak havoc. In this scenario, the AI wouldn't have to be super intelligent, it would just have to be incredibly smart at whatever task the bad actor needed it to perform. Here's a scenario. An evil entity wants to release a worldwide chemical weapon. They wouldn't need to know how to build the weapon or even how to deploy it. They could employ AI to purchase the chemical elements online, synthesize the chemicals into a weapon, and develop a method to release the weapon into the world. Even if we develop a safe AI system, it means that we also know how to build a dangerous or even autonomous one that, in the hands of someone looking to commit atrocities, could be lethal. So doesn't this beg the question, should we be doing this? That's why the Roko's basilisk thought experiment is so interesting and controversial. When it was posted on the Less Wrong discussion board in 2010, it sent shockwaves through the site's user base. The founder of Less Wrong, Eliezer Yudkowsky, actually reported users who panicked about the theory. He viewed the question as dangerous and accused the user who posted the original question of giving nightmares to others on the site, to the point where people were having full-on breakdowns. Even though the post was ultimately discredited, it still feels relevant to current conversations around AI. It's like a version of Pascal's wager, which proposes that a rational person should live like God exists, regardless of the probability that God is real, because the finite costs of believing aren't much compared to the infinite punishment of an eternity in hell. Roko's basilisk says that a rational person should contribute to the creation of AI, regardless of where it'll lead, because the finite costs of contributing are insignificant compared to the potential punishment for not helping. But there are some incongruities in the comparison, aren't there? There could be true risks to aiding in the creation of AI. We could be contributing to the end of the human race at some point in the distant future. Is it really an insignificant task? That's why the thought experiment can be so stressful. It's no wonder that Yudkowsky got upset about the original post. But is there a way to defeat it, to rest easy, to not feel threatened by something that doesn't even exist? Well, if you don't know about Roko's basilisk, then you're technically safe. But you're watching this video, so unfortunately that option's out. However, since the future evil AI is a machine, it won't want to waste resources. So even if the AI is somehow infiltrating our present and throwing out this threat, who's to say it'll follow through on the punishment? Wouldn't that be kind of a waste of time and resources for a machine that surely has something better to do? If we had perfect knowledge of AI, that would change things, but we're in the dark. No one knows what a superhuman AI would or could do, so we're on our own to figure out how we want to contribute to it or not. In the meantime, how can we be effective citizens of the planet and ensure that the current and future AI doesn't eradicate us all? One suggestion is that there's a requirement that AI development not perpetually move forward. That would mean that the next model of an AI wouldn't be that much bigger or more intelligent than the last. If we make big jumps in technology, there's a higher probability that we will tip into self-destruction. All humans getting killed by hypersmart robots sounds very sci-fi. The nature of the threat is really a world where we rely more and more on AI to make judgments that were previously left to humans. If AI cognition eclipses humans, then they can make decisions all the way up to when AI deploys nuclear weapons in war. Perhaps we should try to put in checks, but the way technology works, at least for now, is that AI would simply have to be instructed to win the war. If you give a smart machine a goal, it will do whatever it needs to accomplish the goal without ethical considerations. So nuclear weapons could be launched before we even realize it. This idea is synthesized in a popular theory called the paperclip maximizer problem. It gives the example of someone wanting to create as many paperclips as fast as possible using an AI. Now the AI could come to the reasoning that the thing stopping the mass production of paperclips is that humans have other goals. So if it just gets rid of the humans, then the AI can keep making paperclips with no human-caused distractions. It's a very wild theory, but if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. A more plausible theory is that 5 to 10 years down the line, an AI supercomputer is about 100 times more powerful than the AI we have now. It knows how to build iterations of itself and gets to the point where it has been replicated enough that it's like a gene mutating. Suddenly, the AI that humans were aligned with takes a sharp left turn. It could hack a bank by impersonating someone, or actually hack and steal funds. It could pay a terrorist to destroy all of humanity. However, the key thing about these super intelligent AIs is that they won't have a larger intention. They will just try to accomplish the initial simple goal they were programmed to execute. AI doomers think that we should be taking these types of scenarios seriously, except it's hard to piece together what exactly would happen. The consensus is that at first humans will build a powerful AI that surpasses our intelligence. At some point, there's going to be existential doom. That's the beginning and the end of the story, but what about the middle? There's a huge piece of the puzzle missing, the elusive connecting tissue that takes us from invention to disaster, and in order to really feel the danger of AI possibly ending humanity as we know it, we need to be able to complete the statement. If X happens, we're reaching the point of no return. As it stands, we don't know what X is. In a March 2024 study from the Forecasting Research Institute, the authors asked experts on AI and other existential risks and super forecasters successful in predicting world events to assess the danger of superintelligent AI. The two groups disagreed. A lot. The AI experts were more nervous than the super forecasters about the end of humanity and other detrimental effects of AI. The study had two groups spending hours reading new materials and discussing various issues with people who had opposite viewpoints. The goal was to see if each group was exposed to more information, and would either group change their minds. The study was also looking for issues that helped explain people's beliefs, and which new information might sway them in a different direction on those issues. One of the biggest talking points that divided the groups is whether the hypothetical AI would have the ability to autonomously replicate, acquire resources, and avoid its own shutdown. If the answer was yes, then the skeptics became more worried about the risks. The study didn't dramatically sway either party, but it was one of the first attempts to bring together smart, well-informed people who disagree on the issues of AI doom and shed light on the points of division in the conversation. The biggest differences in opinion center around the long-term future. AI optimists generally thought that human-level AI would take longer to build than the pessimists did. The optimists also cited the need for robotics to reach human levels, not just software, and emphasized that the journey would be much harder. It's one thing to write code in text, but it's another to have a machine learn how to flip a pancake, clean a floor, or perform any other physical task that humans now outperform robots in. The split between groups also came from what researchers called fundamental worldview disagreements. This basically means that the groups disagreed on which was a more extraordinary claim, that AI will kill all humans or that humans will survive alongside smarter than human AI. Historically, extinction tends to happen to dumber, weaker species when a smarter species emerges. If that trend continued with AI, as many feel it could, the burden of proof is on the optimist to show why superintelligent AI wouldn't result in catastrophe. But before we get to the undefined future, we don't need to look any further than the present to get a little nervous. AI is already wiping out some job categories, a pattern we've seen time and time again throughout technological advancement. There's growing concern about what AI advancement will mean for the arts, the definition of what art is, and whose work is valued. As financial institutions adopt automated generative AI, there's more opportunity for AI to have drastic effects on world economic markets and goods across the globe. For example, if an investment bank was optimizing for a very specific type of stock, could we end up with something like the paperclip problem? If the bank wanted to drive up the price of corn, for instance, could it unintentionally start a conflict in a certain region? Our reality is increasingly fractured by disinformation and the erosion of public trust. AI makes the spreading of that information even easier, and it gives individuals hell-bent on causing disruption and division extremely effective tools to do so. If we continue to grow more and more divided and unable to land on what is, in fact, the truth, what can we expect out of our future? Of course, there's already the concerning infringement on civil liberties that's happening and will continue to become more pervasive. Powerful companies already have the free rein to develop and deploy AI with zero guardrails. Algorithms are already in use to mediate our relationships with one another and between ourselves and institutions. It's social media and it's all AI-based. Governments are increasingly deploying algorithms to root out fraud and welfare programs, which often leads to biases against poor and marginalized people. With inherent biases in the AI programs, since they're trained on the biases that already exist online, public programs that incorporate this new technology are vulnerable to rampant discrimination. This might not be as sexy to talk about as the end of the world, but these are still existential threats. If enough individuals are affected by even the current use of AI, we could see a global catastrophe and perpetuate the historical patterns of technology advancing at the expense of vulnerable people. Those people are probably not so excited about AI. The worst case scenario is already their lived reality. Although Roko's basilisk might provoke us to think about some serious existential questions regarding AI, we don't need to spend stressful hours contemplating a hypothetical, dangerous future. Addressing the risks of today can actually help address the risks of tomorrow. It's unrealistic to expect tech companies to slow down, and government or global regulation might not be the right move. The European Union has banned forms of public surveillance and requires reviews of AI systems before they go commercial. However, in countries like the US, that's going to be a harder task to accomplish. The reality is that even with regulation, people can always find the models that are being created. They can still create AI malware and sell it to the highest bidder on a variety of online marketplaces. This could be a terrorist, bad actor, or even a bad government. Perhaps what needs to change is our attitude about what our goal on this planet should be as humans. AI is the truest, final realization of scale. If you like a TV show, AI can generate 100 seasons of it for you to watch. If you need an endless supply of post-its, AI will make sure you get them. But if we insert AI into every goal we have, every need we identify, we are stripping humanity out of life. While we contemplate the end of humanity, we should also consider humanity's current role in the world. It's to create things, love each other, feel sadness and joy, build communities and learn from our past. As humans, we have greater purpose than to just create an efficient world. So maybe don't worry so much about eternal punishment from a distant future AI. Worry about what's happening right in front of you, right now.
You were on your way home when you died. It was a car accident. Nothing particularly remarkable, but fatal nonetheless. You left behind a wife and 2 children. It was a painless death. The EMTs tried their best to save you, but to no avail. Your body was so utterly shattered that you were better off. Trust me. And that's when you met me. Wait, what happened? You asked. Where am I? You died, I said, matter-of-factly. No point in mincing words. There was a truck, and it was skidding. Yep, I said. I died? Yup, but don't feel bad about it. Everyone dies, I said. You looked around. There was nothingness. Just you and me. What is this place? You asked. Is this the afterlife? More or less, I said. Are you God? You asked. Yup, I replied. I'm God. Few things capture our imagination quite like death. It's going to happen to us. We know it's going to happen to us. And yet, we live our lives pretending that it's not going to happen. Not to us, at least we think. Not right now. We run away from it every chance we get. And yet, somehow, we are preoccupied with it. Almost simultaneously, we ignore death and worship its possibility. We write books about how life is short, but we never really live like it is. Who are we? What do you think happens after death? My kids. My wife, you said. What about them? Will they be all right? That's what I like to see, I said. You just died and your main concern is for your family. That's good stuff right there. You looked at me with fascination. To you, I didn't look like God. I just looked like some man. Or possibly a woman? Some vague authority figure, maybe. More of a grammar school teacher than the Almighty. Don't worry, I said. They'll be fine. Your kids will remember you as perfect in every way. They didn't have time to grow contempt for you. Your wife will cry on the outside, but will be secretly relieved. To be fair, your marriage was falling apart. If it's any consolation, she'll feel very guilty for feeling relieved. Oh, you said. So what happens now? Do I go to heaven or hell or something? Neither, I said. You'll be reincarnated. Ah, you said. So the Hindus were right. All religions are right in their own way, I said. Walk with me. You followed along as we strode through the void. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. As the embodied soul continuously passes, in this body, from childhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death.
A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. And worn-out garments are shed by the body. Worn-out bodies are shed by the dweller within the body. New bodies are donned by the dweller, like garments. These are the words from the Bhagavad Gita, one of the holy scriptures of Hinduism. In it are verses about the seemingly unending cycle of life and of reincarnation. Every version of a being acts and reacts, and their actions determine how they are going to be manifested in the next life. We commonly refer to this as karma. This continues nearly eternally, till the soul yearns for a higher sense of being, which it can ultimately achieve once it rids itself of all desires, ego, or pleasure. The yearning for a higher being is only truly met when no such yearning exists. So, is this life, the one we're living right now, just a mere test? Where are we going? Nowhere in particular, I said. It's just nice to walk while we talk. So what's the point then? You asked. When I get reborn, I'll just be a blank slate, right? A baby. So all my experiences and everything I did in this life won't matter. Not so, I said. You have within you all the knowledge and experiences of all your past lives. You just don't remember them right now. I stopped walking and took you by the shoulders. Your soul is more magnificent, beautiful, and gigantic than you can possibly imagine. A human mind can only contain a tiny fraction of what you are. It's like sticking your finger in a glass of water to see if it's hot or cold. You put a tiny part of yourself into the vessel, and when you bring it back out, you've gained all the experiences it had. You've been a human for the last 48 years, so you haven't stretched out enough yet and felt the rest of your immense consciousness. If we hung out here for long enough, you'd start remembering everything. But there's no point in doing that between each life. How many times have I been reincarnated then? Oh, lots and lots, and into lots of different lives, I said. This time around, you'll be a Chinese peasant girl in 1540 AD. Wait, what? You stammered. You're sending me back in time. Well, I guess technically. Time as you know it only exists in your universe. Things are different where I come from. Where do you come from? You said. Oh, sure, I explained. I come from somewhere. Somewhere else. And there are others like me. I know you want to know what it's like there, but honestly, you wouldn't understand. Oh, you said, a little let down. But wait, if I get reincarnated to other places in time, I could have interacted with myself at some point. Sure, happens all the time. And with both lives only aware of their own lifespan, you don't even know it's happening. Other religions such as Islam or Christianity don't quite preach the idea of reincarnation, but when you look through the pages, they too treat this life as a test. It is the afterlife where life achieves completion and we get to live, truly. What you do in this life determines the fate of what your soul will be. While the concept of death is slightly different across certain religions and theologies, in that some of it happens over and over again, and in others you die once but live twice, nearly all religions encourage followers to think about the cascading effects of their actions at a macro scale. There are more famous ideas in this realm, of course. The simulation theory is just one of the more famous ones, where reality is potentially reduced to a high-definition video game running in some scrawny teenager's basement. It's his reality, and you and I are living in it. This certainly is not as grandiose of a possibility as something from Scripture, but the logic that leads one to the simulation theory is ironclad. What does this all mean then? So what's the point of it all? Seriously, I asked. Seriously, you're asking me for the meaning of life. I mean, isn't that a little stereotypical? Well, it's a reasonable question, you pestered. I looked you in the eye. The meaning of life, the reason I made this whole universe, is for you to mature. You mean mankind, you want us to mature. No, just you. I made this whole universe for you. With each new life, you grow and mature and become a larger and greater intellect. Just me. What about everyone else? There is no one else, I said. In this universe, there's just you and me.
You stared blankly at me. But all the people on Earth. All you. Different incarnations of you. Wait, I'm everyone. Now you're getting it, I said, with a congratulatory slap on the back. I'm every being who ever lived, or who will ever live. Yes. I'm Abraham Lincoln, and you're John Wilkes Booth too, I added. I'm Hitler, you replied, and you're the millions he killed. I'm Jesus, and you're everyone who followed him. You fell silent. Every time you victimized someone, I said, you were victimizing yourself. Every act of kindness you've done to yourself. Every happy and sad moment ever experienced by any human was, or will be, experienced by you. You thought for a long time. Why? You asked me. Why do all of this? Because someday, you will become like me. Because that's what you are. You're one of my kind. You're my child. You mean I'm a god? No, not yet. You're a fetus. You're still growing. Once you've lived every human life throughout all time, you will have grown enough to be born. So the whole universe, you said, it's just an egg, I answered. Now it's time for you to move on to your next life. And I sent you on your way. Whether you believe in an organized religion or not, we've all wondered what happens when our eyes close for that one last time. Maybe we watch our lifeless bodies as our souls float away. Maybe we try to call upon our loved ones to let them know it's all going to be okay. But they just never listen. Maybe nothing happens. At all. Maybe there is no meaning. Andy Weir's short story, supposedly written in less than an hour, does talk about an afterlife scenario. But that's not really the message it's trying to deliver. Maybe his point is to highlight the ability of every person to be both the worst manifestation of humanity, but also be the best of it. Andy poses this when he says that the protagonist was both Hitler and the people he killed. It's hypothetical, of course. But then again, how far are we at any given time from the worst version of ourselves? I often find myself looking at pictures of famous, or infamous people for that matter, as babies. In the backdrop of reality, these baby faces can remind us about the innocence every human is capable of. Perhaps one of the lessons from the egg theory is to remind people of the power of a situation to turn us into who we are. This is not to absolve anyone of their wrongdoing or take away from the gravity of their actions, but a chance to shed light on the fact that a lot of who we are is quite simply circumstance, and that we might be better able to prevent future atrocities if we're able to foresee the circumstances that lead to them. This was, in large part, the focus of the now infamous Stanford prison experiments. College students were hired to play either guard or prisoner, and their behavior would then be studied. In just over a day, the power imbalance had manifested into near total tyranny, where the guards would abuse the prisoners to such an extent that a lot of them had to be discharged from the experiments. This ultimately led to the termination of the study after just 6 days. Some say the guards behaved like this because these guards were inherently bad people. Others say it was the power imbalance that was always set for an outcome like this. I urge you to read into it yourself, but these studies do demonstrate, and quite reassuringly so, that there may be more bad circumstances than bad people in this world. The egg theory also need not only be about righteousness or evil, it can also be about looking at life through the eyes of others. Perhaps we would think of life differently if we could see ourselves through the eyes of a loved one. We often tend to be harsh on ourselves for mistakes, but if a friend were to make the same mistake, we would try and support them. Why should we treat ourselves harsher than we would treat a friend? Imagine being a parent and finally getting to understand their worries for when they said they couldn't sleep when you didn't call. Imagine how we might rethink our worldviews if we could look at things through the eyes of someone who disagrees with us. In fact, that is supposedly the origin of the story. Not some near-death experience that Andy Weir had, but rather a disagreement with his aunt. What would a world like that be? When empathy becomes more than just leaving words unsaid, and turns into a feeling, an emotion that you don't have to interpret, but rather feel yourself.
There is also the concept of being reborn and carrying over your lessons into the next life. What would you become if you could live again? If you knew then what you know now, how would you do things differently? What if you never got that chance? Who am I kidding? Luckily, we get that chance every day. As Confucius once said, every man has 2 lives, and the second starts when he realizes he has just one.
God is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest of all that the world has yet owned has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood off of us? What water is there for us to clean ourselves? What festivals of atonement, what sacred games shall we have to invent? Is not the greatness of this deed too great for us? Must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it? This passage, written by Friedrich Nietzsche, poses a fascinating question. What do we do when we no longer find meaning in our religions and long-standing traditions? What do we do when the very foundations of society have been broken? How do we overcome the void that nihilism leaves behind? Nihilism is the belief that life has no meaning, that morals and values don't exist, and that all of the structures and institutions we seem destined to live by aren't real. You don't have to care about anything because nothing matters. At first, the idea of nihilism is liberating. Some might even say it's comforting. Imagine waking up without that feeling of the weight of the world being on your shoulders, or going to bed without feeling like you've let everyone around you down. You're no longer bound by religion, moral codes, or sacred traditions. You're free to live life on your own terms because, at the end of the day, nothing matters. The philosophy of nihilism was popularized by 19th century philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, but contrary to what people think, he didn't want a nihilistic society, but instead he believed nihilism was necessary to break down the institutions of morality of the time and to allow something new to take place. In a sense, to allow us to become gods. His philosophy was that we need to overcome nihilism, not get stuck in it. He believed that the world has no order or structure except what we give to it. Essentially, what we think about the world is what is. So, if we believe that nothing matters and that life has no meaning, then we're destined to live in a world void of meaning, community, relationships, or anything else we might value. He felt that the effects of this philosophical approach would destroy any conviction society had, and we would see a full-blown crisis of humanity. Some of that came to pass in the 20th century after he died, when themes of nihilism were resonating with artists, social critics, and philosophers. The second half of the 20th century was defined in part by anti-foundationalism, an attitude of indifference to social structures, business, and what some might have called the man. By the 2000s, a mood of gloom, anxiety, anger, and despair had taken hold and has, in many ways, had a grip on us ever since. And still people turn to nihilism, not to feel despair, but to try and find an answer to the question we all have. Why? Why do I have to wake up every day and work 8 hours at a job I hate? Why do I have to follow religious traditions that I don't even believe in? Why do I have to live my life according to the rules of others? These questions have become even more prevalent in our post-pandemic society, where it feels like the world is crumbling. Every day we hear of a new war in a different part of the world, and there's a cost of living crisis everywhere you look. AI is taking some of our jobs, and flowers are blooming in Antarctica. When faced with this horrifying reality, the concept of nothing matters can be freeing. By taking the meaning out of things, they stop being so bleak. Instead of worrying about the future, you have an escape, an opportunity to not deal with the questions that you might not have the answers to. It's why the subreddit r/nihilism grew from 31,000 people before the pandemic to around 150,000 members today. The world, its problems, and our questions and worries about it can feel infinite. It's overwhelming, but nihilism offers an opportunity to feel insignificant within it all, to feel like you don't matter because none of it matters. There's endless freedom in that. It allows us to feel indifferent about things that would otherwise occupy our attention 24/7. The world doesn't affect us, and therefore we don't affect the world. Politics doesn't matter, hardship doesn't matter. But the challenge with nihilism and the problem that Nietzsche was unable to solve is that at the same time, that means friendships don't matter. Family doesn't matter, love, happiness, none of it matters. If we fall too far down the nihilism rabbit hole, we start to feel a sense of loss. Loss of the things that bring us joy in a world that's already hard to live in, and loss of our own selves. Embracing nihilism is understandable and sometimes helpful, but it can create a loss of purpose and motivation in our lives. That sense of indifference about the world means we're also indifferent about our lives and the path we want to take. This makes us feel emptiness and despair about who and what we are. It can lead to destructive behavior. If nothing has meaning, then our actions don't have consequences. We end up not feeling any sort of personal responsibility for what we do, even if we do bad things. Nihilism also makes it very hard to establish an ethical framework. It questions the very existence of morals, values, and ethics. And without these, there aren't really any universal principles to bond us all. Sure, we don't have to agree on everything, but if we stop trying to be good people and caring about others, society will fall apart. It means we become disconnected from not just strangers, but also the people closest to us. Nihilism questions the mere existence of relationships and institutions. Essentially, it challenges community. It fosters a feeling of detachment. Sure, not all institutions are good, but many are important to how we build our lives. We go to school to learn, but also to socialize. We play pickup basketball at the local park to exercise, but also to socialize. We go to places of worship to perform our religious practices, but also, you guessed it, to socialize. Because at the end of the day, we're social animals, and community is one of the most important things in living a long and healthy life. These actions that we use to bond with others are also teaching us empathy. Humans are the only species that are able to understand an experience without living it. We have empathy for others. If nihilism asks us to get rid of that empathy, it is not only asking us to let go of a vital part of ourselves, but it's also creating cracks in our social cohesion. This is the destruction that Nietzsche was worried about. He dedicated his life to understanding nihilism. He saw it as the result of the people's frustrations while searching for meaning and purpose in religion. Nietzsche was writing about this after the Enlightenment, when people started questioning the religious principles that had guided society for so long. Suddenly, the age-old purpose of living for God didn't hold meaning anymore, because people stopped believing in God. The collapse in meaning also meant a collapse in purpose. Whether we like it or not, purpose in our life often comes from suffering and pain, things Nietzsche felt were essential to experience to live a profound life. He told us it was out of the deepest death that the highest must come to its height. Nietzsche wanted to turn nihilism around. He believed that if we survived a takeover of nihilistic principles, we could discover the correct course for humankind. In this sense, nihilism is a transitional stage of life that needs to be overcome to find meaning in why we suffer. However, Nietzsche also believed that not everyone has it in them to overcome nihilism. Passive nihilists, as he called them, would never find meaning in the world. Their approach to life embraces a feeling of nothingness and despair. This, unfortunately, often leads people towards mass movements that like to tell them what to believe. Cults, political parties, and religious groups give passive nihilists an easy way out. On the other hand, active nihilists might recognize their purposeless existence and strive to work their way out of it. This can look like destroying old values and constructing new ones that are meaningful to how you see the world in your own personal evolution. Think of a piece of stone, meaningless when it is just plopped in front of you, but if you start chiseling away at it, day after day, you can create a spear, a statue, or jewelry and give it purpose and meaning. Of course, we don't always get the stone plopped in front of us. It can be hard to figure out where to start looking for that meaning. We might not be born with a single passion or life purpose, but if we allow ourselves to feel our suffering, difficulty, and pain, we can get an idea of what we want from life. If we envy a friend who has been practicing tennis day after day and finally wins a competition, maybe that's a sign we should try tennis or even just pick up a new hobby. If we see people suffering in our community, we can turn our sadness into action by volunteering at a local soup kitchen. When we study our emotions, we find meaning, and we can overcome the despair that nihilism might cause us. But how do we know when we've overcome it? Well, imagine you were told you had to live your exact life repeatedly. If you're okay with that, despite the hardship, you're not viewing your life or the world in a nihilistic way. You've learned to celebrate life as a miracle and embrace every piece of it, even when it doesn't seem great. Nietzsche has a metaphor of a shepherd and a snake. The snake had crawled into the shepherd's throat, and at first he's choking on the snake. But then he bites its head off to save his own life. He spits out the head and allows the pain to be a part of him so that he can continue living. He takes control of the despair and the pain. When we allow others to dictate things for us, it doesn't feel good. We want to be in touch with our feelings and tackle our problems from a place of purpose. Nihilism doesn't let us do that. It leaves us, instead, susceptible to being controlled by others. The good news is that although Nietzsche thought that once the Enlightenment happened and God became less relevant, people would spiral into a catatonic nihilistic state, they didn't. So now, even if nihilism feels like an enticing philosophy to embrace, it won't be the end of society as we know it. And in fact, if we play our cards right, it might help us. By removing something like God or government from being a central figure in our existence, we take attention off the sole meaning of our life and put it on something bigger. Maybe our one life doesn't hold all the meaning we thought it would, and maybe that's okay. The author Wendy Seifert wrote a book arguing that a meaningless life could make us happy.
Some principles of nihilism can be a savior for the current state of hyper-individualism, a cure for our obsession to find meaning in everything from what job you have to what you eat for dinner. She coined the term sunny nihilism, which suggests a chance to enjoy the moment, even if it's chaotic. And even if it doesn't feel meaningful, the odds of us just being alive are worth making the most of it.
Recently, I was scrolling through old pictures, and I found a picture from when I was a little kid. I took the picture and held it up to my face in front of a mirror, and I realized, wow, I look nothing like that kid in the picture. We don't have the same physical properties. Our thoughts, ideas, and beliefs are different, and we certainly don't have the same memories. But still, I know it's me. My brain sees the picture and creates a storyline that I was there, I am here, and I'll be somewhere else in the future, looking back doing the same exact thing. This is the idea of self. The idea that there's something deep within us that remains fundamentally the same even when everything else changes. It's the idea that we can grow bigger, create new memories, lose old memories, change our thoughts and beliefs. But deep down, there's still something that remains fundamentally unchanged. The idea of self is one that has baffled pretty much everyone, scientists and philosophers alike, for centuries. Because as easy as it is to describe, understanding why or how it works sits on the opposite end of the spectrum. As humans, we experience a lot of different senses. We feel things, we see things, and we hear things. We have thoughts, we have feelings, and we have the ability to learn new things. But all of these things are separate experiences. So, at what point do all of these sentient properties become you? As I continued scrolling through the photos, I came across pictures from elementary, middle school, high school, and everything after. All of these photos looked completely different. When I think back to those times and the decisions I made, I would never make most of them right now. Yet, without a shadow of a doubt, my brain convinces me that I am still me. The words I and me are more than just pronouns. They are the two ways we describe self. When we say I, we talk about a being who is consciously aware of the present moment. So, I am reading this line on a script right now. On the other hand, when we describe self using the word me, we're usually referring to a personal identity, who we think we are. Me usually reflects who we are through the lenses of our past, present, and plans for the future. But we color our memories based on what we need to be in the present, and our plans for the future are always changing. How can there be a consistent being if everything that forms it changes? We like to think of memories as simply playing back a video in our head of what happened in the past. But that's not what memories are. Memories are our brain's reconstruction of the past experiences. We create these memories to fit the present narrative based on what we know now, how we describe me now, as well as our present needs and goals. So if you now think of yourself as a kind person, you're more likely to remember all the times you've been kind to people, rather than the times you've been unkind. We form narratives about ourselves around how we want to be seen by others. We convince ourselves that we'll act and behave a certain way to fit that narrative, even when we're often mistaken. If this is true and we can't trust our memories to give an accurate description of who we were in the past, then how can we have a self that exists through time? Aren't we just creating new selves every time this narrative completely changes? Think about it. It's not that the narrative continues down a different path, it changes completely such that what was no longer is. And if what was can no longer be, then we cannot say that there is a self that persists through time. Rather, the idea of self is one that is constantly recreated by our brains when the need arises. This is what we refer to as the illusion of self. Contrary to what you might be thinking, this does not mean that we don't have a self. It simply means that it does not exist the way we think it does. Our bodies are made up of a bundle of perceptions, sensations, and thoughts. Our brains try to make sense of the randomized nature of our being by creating a linear storyline. You were there, now you're here. It is this storyline of sorts that we describe as self. It's just the brain's way of making sense of the randomness that is human existence. This is why the idea of self that we have now cannot be true. When most people think of a self, they think of something that can exist outside of the brain. But that's just not possible. The self is a sensation of continuity and unity of self that is created by the brain. Anything other than this is just wishful thinking that humans are more than just a sentient bunch of molecules. The idea that deep down we have a soul, an immaterial essence, the driving force of individual existence. And in most religions of the world, this is true. But not Buddhism. Anatta is the Buddhist doctrine that teaches against the idea of a self. It teaches that there's no underlying permanent substance, there's no soul. Rather, everything we experience is simply perceived by our senses, not by I or me. It teaches that since there is no I, material wealth can't belong to me. So we shouldn't crave these things or hold on to them like they're worth more than just a few good sensations. Dropping all the other pictures I was flipping through, I picked up the picture from when I was a kid again. I held it in front of my face and stared at the mirror again. And as the existential crisis flooded my mind, I couldn't help but ask, if I wasn't told that was me, would I have known? If I had seen this picture randomly without any context, would I have been able to tell that it was me? Definitely not. So then how can I say that there's a self that existed in that kid that still exists in me? How can I say our experiences are linear, that we're the same person? The truth is, you're not the same person that existed before, and you're not the same person that will exist in the future. Or at least there's no evidence to prove it. This thought is both terrifying and exciting. It's terrifying because it's fundamentally against everything we know about ourselves. If there's no self, then there's no self-will. And if there's no self-will, there's no morality. There's no right or wrong, good or evil, just a bunch of molecules interacting to the stimuli they're presented with. But on the other hand, it is exciting because it liberates you. Now you don't have to think, it's me against the world, because there is no you to begin with. You'll no longer think life is unfair because bad things happen to you. You'll see bad things happening to you simply as things just happening. Whether it's good or bad, it doesn't really matter, does it? You'll no longer be scared of death, because nothing can die that never was. You'll understand that death is simply a natural occurrence. The illusion of self is one of the most powerful and consistent illusions we experience. It's there right from when we're toddlers up until the day we die. If it isn't real, then why do our brains create these storylines? Why does this illusion exist? As living things, our goal is to survive and thrive. We learn, adapt, we grow. And one of the most important building blocks of survival is competition. Without competition, we'll all be satisfied with where we are and have no desire to strive for anything at all. Without the illusion of self, there is no competition. Competition is built on the idea of a single entity outdoing another. If there is no single entity and just sentient chemical reactions, there will be no competition. And without competition, things just don't really work the way they do now. If you're still not convinced that the need for competition alone is the reason our brains make up the idea of a unified and persistent being in all of us, you're not alone. Not everyone believes in the idea of a lack of self. Some people who meditate can sometimes get to a state of complete quietness and emptiness, described as a pure consciousness event. This is an empty state of consciousness. There are no thoughts, no technical mental processes going, just a deep-seated sense of I-ness, an independent identity. Many people use this state as an argument for the existence of self, but there are two things wrong with this school of thought. One, there is no scientific evidence to back it up. We cannot determine what is what simply by judging based on people's personal experiences, unfortunately. Two, the feeling of emptiness is a mental process. That in itself is your brain telling you that you're free of thoughts. It's still a brain activity. Some people argue that if there is no self, then how can we trust the judgments of anyone? If a ghost came out today to tell us that there are no ghosts, how do we believe them? For you to be able to pass judgment on consciousness, you need to be an objective observer. But being an objective observer means you need to have a self who observes all, like you're a god or something. So that negates almost every argument you're trying to defend. But in truth, the illusion of self is not a ghost telling us that there are no ghosts. It's a figure that we call a ghost, telling us that they can feel, touch, and smell. They can interact with living things, so they cannot be ghosts. It's not just postulating the absence of a self, it's showing the reality of its absence through scientific research. We don't need a self to tell us there is no self. We only need the evidence. And the evidence is clear when I hold up the picture of when I was a kid to my face. It's clear that everything has changed. I know I am still causally related to who that kid was, but there is no evidence to prove that there's something in that kid that is still in me that has persisted through time. At this point, I was having an existential crisis, so I put down my own pictures and picked up the pictures of my grandma. She's much older now. She doesn't really speak much, but she still talks. She still remembers what the world was like when she was younger. But what about people her age who suffer from advanced Alzheimer's? People who can't recognize their own loved ones, who can't remember anything from the past. Do they still have a self? When does a person stop being a self? If you no longer have any memories of the past or plans for the future, what then is self? What does the word me refer to? If the very components that make the self can easily be altered or wiped away completely, then the idea of a persistent existence through time is not possible. Only when we disregard the idea of self can we begin to understand why people seem to go completely off script. We often judge people by the idea of them we've created in our head, when in reality, we're all just a bunch of competing impulses and urges, swaying us one way and then the other. The idea that there is no self that exists through time explains why we sometimes act in ways that are inconsistent with the story we tell both to ourselves and to others. The truth is, the illusion of self is simply a collection of our memories of the past, desires in the present, and plans for the future. It's our psychological profile. It's not a supernatural entity that exists independently. It does not transcend death. It does not exist through time. We were not, and we won't be. We simply are.
You find yourself walking down the street with your morning coffee in hand as your brain is flooded with the dozens of issues and problems you need to deal with. Maybe it's a relationship that's on the rocks, a pet that needs to go to the vet, but you know that paying that bill means you might be short on rent this month. Or the fact that the very coffee you're drinking is probably going to keep you up all night worrying, but you kinda have to drink it anyway or else you can't survive the day. You're working a job you hate just so you can make ends meet. You're experiencing an existential crisis, and it's in moments like this that we start to question everything we've been taught about life. Why are we doing any of this? Like Sisyphus in Greek mythology, life feels like we're forced to push a boulder up a hill, only for it to roll right back down. How can we live a life of meaning when it feels like nothing in the world makes any sense? If you find yourself grappling with these questions, there are different philosophies that can help provide answers. The first is Existentialism, which challenges you to embrace your newfound freedom and use it to create meaning amidst life's unending uncertainties. Highlighted by philosophers like Friedrich Nietzsche and Soren Kierkegaard, Existentialism never truly found its way to mainstream acceptance until the emergence of the 20th century philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre. Through Sartre, we've come to understand existentialism as a way to confront life and its fundamental absurdity. It's a belief that urges us to embrace our individuality and forge our own paths in defiance of an indifferent universe. You'll see more of what Sartre meant by his words that open this video as we get further along in outlining what all these isms mean in our lives. To fully grasp existentialism, we'll first need to examine the teachings of Plato and Aristotle. Both believed an individual is born with attributes intrinsically linked to that person's identity, which they deemed to be their essence. Even objects we share this universe with, like trees, possess an essence. A tree has roots, a trunk, branches, and leaves. Although many kinds of trees exist, these qualities define an individual tree's essence, which makes it very different from every other tree on the planet. Essentialists like Plato and Aristotle believed that essence exists before we're even born. For example, essentialists from the industrial age will tell you that the essence of a man is in his role as a provider and protector, even though many today no longer believe that to be true. Similarly, on a cultural scale, essence plays a significant role around the world. In Japan, the concept of omotenashi, or serving others wholeheartedly, is a form of essence. Essence gives us a purpose. It's the idea that something exists outside of us that we have to live up to. We are tasked with living up to that purpose, and it's something we always seem to be in search of. The world operated under this belief for a large part of human history, thanks to institutions like religion and tradition. But while these beliefs are based on the idea that essence comes before existence, existentialists believe the opposite, that existence precedes essence. They believe that we come into this world with no predetermined purpose, and that we have the freedom to define what our essence is on our own terms. A figure like Prince Harry from the British royal family represents existentialism in an interesting way. Born into what many would consider a strong and unbreakable essence, he decided to walk away from that life in pursuit of freedom and love. Redefining his life outside of the confines of royalty, his decision mirrors the existentialist principle that freedom comes with a profound level of responsibility. Man is condemned to be free because once thrown into the world, he is responsible for everything he does. This quote from Sartre highlights an important aspect of the existentialist plight. Everyone is fully accountable for their choices, therefore we must confront the consequences of our actions. Existentialism asserts that individuals aren't bound by societal or religious norms. In other words, you don't have to subscribe to the meaning given by society's figures of authority. You might suddenly realize that your teacher's sense of meaning is pointless, as is that of your parents and even the leaders of the country in which you live. Why should you listen to them when they don't get to determine your essence? It sounds tempting to be completely free from the shackles of society, but being an existentialist almost means accepting the consequences that come as a result of rebelling against conventional authority. On the flip side, if you choose to live according to a predetermined rulebook for life, you are living in bad faith. Deciding to quit your hectic construction job in exchange for your artistic passions is a worthwhile pursuit. However, when you face struggles from a lack of stability, you'll need to charge head-on, understanding the consequences of freedom. If you instead choose to remain at that job despite it being unfulfilling, you'll be living in bad faith. At the core, existentialists believe that whatever meaning you find in life, you must determine on your own. Do you genuinely enjoy accounting? Go for it, that's your meaning. Are you only doing this job because you're scared of being a failed artist? That's bad faith. Existentialism isn't the magical answer to life's alienating and questionable problems. What it does is present a type of authenticity that makes you an active participant in life. This shift in mentality is an important step towards fulfillment in the modern world. It's also closely connected with the absurd, but it treats this absurdity with a sense of agency, urging individuals to confront it head-on. We are encouraged to engage with the absurd in pursuit of meaning and authenticity. While existentialism grapples with an individual's search for meaning in an indifferent universe, absurdism takes things a step further. Why should you search for meaning when existence itself is absurd? To an absurdist, life is inherently meaningless, and so every attempt to find meaning or purpose is futile. Absurdism embraces the inherent contradictions of life without succumbing to nihilism or despair. Rather than seeking to discover meaning or purpose, absurdism encourages individuals to confront their existence with defiance. Albert Camus, a 20th century philosopher, believed in absurdism as a form of philosophical rebellion against humanity's search for meaning. Much of history centers on a belief in an ultimate answer that will provide a sense of relief to life's unending cruelty. For a figure like Camus, the absurd emerges as an answer to nihilism's despair, and a humbling truth to existentialism's demand for meaning. Camus wrote, "The absurd is the essential concept and the first truth. Much like taking the red pill in the Matrix, acknowledging the absurd is seen as the first step to living in reality. Do you get extremely self-critical after falling short on personal goals you've set for yourself? In the eyes of an absurdist, there's no point to that despair. After all, you can find freedom in the fact that it's all ultimately meaningless." This newfound insight can be a powerful push towards healthier, more detached thoughts. For an existentialist, finding your own meaning might feel satisfying, but to an absurdist, true freedom exists in rejecting the concept of meaning. What happens when an existentialist's meaning is scrutinized, challenged, and broken down? In absurdism, meaning is a futile endeavor when life flaunts its indifference without warning. Existentialism offers a compelling response to absurdism. Instead of choosing to cave into despair, it encourages us to actively engage with life. After all, authenticity, self-awareness, and a pursuit of meaning are core tenets of this philosophy. While absurdism may lead to total apathy from a lack of passion, existentialism tasks us with taking ownership of our lives. Even when things don't go the way you might have intended, it's important to avoid falling into an autopilot routine. If you suddenly lost your dream home in a fire, absurdists might question why you were ever attached to that home in the first place.
With existentialism, you are challenged to acknowledge the pain of loss while recognizing the significance of your attachments. Losing a home is undeniably tragic, but we are encouraged to find meaning in response to this adversity. That quest for meaning can lead to a deeper appreciation for your bond with your loved ones. Existentialism lets you dig deeper when it seems like all hope is lost. In many ways, it's a celebration of the indomitable human spirit. Meaning can be found anywhere and everywhere, and as an existentialist, you have the choice and ability to find purpose and fulfillment no matter what. Should we really do anything about life's inherent lack of meaning? Why react in the first place? Existentialism is often at odds with nihilism. It's no surprise, as nihilism is the warmest embrace one can give to life's hopelessness. While an absurdist advocates for defiance of life's absurdity, a nihilist doubles down on its meaninglessness, adopting despair towards life. Although existentialists must find a meaning of their own, for nihilists, nothing comes next once the meaninglessness is acknowledged. Life is meaningless, so we must act accordingly. Nihilism is often associated with the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. While he was never a strong advocate for this philosophy, Nietzsche presented nihilism as a consequence to the death of traditional values. God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him. To Nietzsche, losing the once default belief in God presents a predicament that ultimately leads to nihilistic thoughts. You can think of nihilism as the default state of humanity when God and the premise of a supreme being are out of the picture. While nihilism is rooted in despair, certain aspects of this concept provide insightful reflections. In fact, there's an active or optimistic type of nihilism that exists. Optimistic nihilism challenges conventional values, seeing the removal of traditional meanings as an opportunity to sprout new moral and cultural horizons. Nietzsche believed this to be a potentially liberating view, as it opened doors to value based on collective and personal will. Optimistic nihilism exists in our world, and it manifests in some interesting ways. A figure like Elon Musk, who claims to have read Nietzsche at age 14, represents this philosophy quite well. Even if his personal opinions are questionable, his outside-of-the-box approach to technology and space exploration challenges old wisdom and expectations. SpaceX is a company that revolutionized the cost of space exploration. Many people would avoid taking on a government-backed organization like NASA, especially when so much of the science is locked behind classified information. With optimistic nihilism, one unlocks the ability to push significant boundaries that were left untouched due to strong, long-established beliefs. While everyone else might be scared to pull the 100-year-old curtain back, a nihilist realizes that giving power to such a belief doesn't help anyone. If there's a monster on the other side, the fear ends. If there is no monster, the fear ends. At its core, existentialism offers a distinct perspective in response to nihilism. Although the universe doesn't offer an inherent meaning, existentialists believe that we have a capacity to live a defined and fulfilling life with our choices and actions. Existentialism acknowledges our potential for personal growth, ethical engagement, and a meaningful existence in a universe that lacks an objective meaning. It's a celebration of our freedom to shape our lives and identities. With this philosophy, we can fully advocate for our confrontation of modern existential dilemmas. Existentialism, absurdism, and nihilism all accept life's meaninglessness, but each of them provides very different responses to this meaninglessness. To explain this difference, picture yourself trapped in solitary confinement. Absurdism teaches you to stop looking for meaning in your suffering and to instead laugh in the face of your captors. In the myth of Sisyphus, pushing a boulder uphill seems like a futile punishment, but each defiant attempt brings a sense of fulfillment. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Nihilism teaches you to do nothing. It's all meaninglessness. Your imprisonment, your defiance, your search for meaning, none of it matters. You would most likely find a nihilist lying in bed waiting for the end to come. Life's inherent lack of meaning renders them detached. They are resigned to the inevitability of existence without a desire to engage in introspection or defiance. Existentialism teaches you to take this experience as an opportunity for self-reflection and personal evolution. Each moment in confinement becomes a canvas upon which you may create meaning and even improve your identity. By embracing your mental freedom, you can seek out purpose even in the face of adversity. This mentality can lead to some powerful results. Throughout his 27-year imprisonment during South Africa's apartheid regime, Nelson Mandela committed to meaning in the form of human dignity and the rights of every individual, regardless of race. This commitment reflects the existentialist theme of finding meaning through personal struggles. In the end, this enduring belief is what helped Mandela eventually reshape the future of his country. An existentialist mindset was key to keeping himself together. holding on to his core sense of meaning until his eventual release. Existentialism allows us to embrace individuality at its core. Even if life has no meaning, there's still a strong and often unexpected beauty in what we're able to create from the rubble of life's absurdity. As an existentialist, your life has meaning the moment you decide to create one. It's like the ultimate cheat code against apathy and despair. Instead of succumbing to the void, the act of living transforms into an art form. By embracing existentialism, you can confront life's inherent uncertainties, while also transforming them into opportunities to pursue personal growth. The next time you're faced with a tough decision and that overwhelming feeling dawns upon you, remember that you have the freedom to create your own meaning. If the pressure of getting a job is clouding your mind, it might be time to ask yourself what really matters. Take some time to reflect, ponder your next steps, prioritize what makes a meaningful life in your heart, and decide for yourself what your life should be. Once you feel like you've figured it out, you can begin to live authentically. Even if you're working in a field you lack passion for, you should work knowing that you intend to change things soon. Never succumb to bad faith, and you'll be able to take on life's absurdity with a head held high.
Life is but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It's a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Have you ever met someone who calls himself a nihilist? Maybe you have a friend from college or a family member who says they're a disciple of Nietzsche. At every opportunity, they love to wax poetic about the meaninglessness of life. Briefly indulging them in their philosophical ideas can expand your mind and help you to see things you never would have. But the truth is, outside of philosophical discussion, leading a nihilistic life is bleak. Think about it, if nothing matters and we're all just specks of dust floating through space and time, what's the point in trying at all? Building healthy relationships with friends and family doesn't seem worth it because in the end, everyone you know will die anyway. All attempts at self-improvement are futile because in the universe's grand plan, none of it matters. Even if you're not all doom and gloom, there will be days when getting out of bed will seem pointless, where life itself will seem kinda pointless. And the current state of the world, with issues like the climate crisis, the rise in extreme politics, and economic instability, doesn't help with our psychological state. This glimpse into the void might dissuade you from wanting to do anything with your life. You're staring down nihilism, the belief in nothing. And framed like this, it makes life sound pretty awful. But there's another way to look at nihilism, one that teaches you not to see the glass as half full or half empty, but instead to throw the glass away and drink straight from the faucet until you're satisfied. This is optimistic nihilism, the realization that the universe's meaninglessness is the most liberating thing in the world. It's the type of nihilism you get when standing on the precipice of a huge mountain or watching a mother bird feed her young. It's the profound smack of insignificance you feel when faced with the miracle of your existence. The amount of luck and chance that it took for you to get here in the first place. Optimistic nihilism doesn't mean we're doomed to live in a meaningless universe. Instead, it allows us to experience the universe in our own unique ways. According to the nihilist, you and I don't matter. Nothing does. Religious morality or societal norms don't restrict your existence. You are entirely free and in control of making your life mean something. Once you accept the meaninglessness of your life as a gift rather than a burden, you find peace with the life you have. Because life is brief and fleeting, it's precious. Writing in the late 19th century, German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche was worried about modernity. He was very critical of the traditional European morality and the religion of his time, which placed Christian beliefs at the center of social and political life. In his 1882 book, The Gay Science, he proclaimed the infamous line, "God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him." Here Nietzsche didn't make an argument for atheism. Instead, he observed that believing in one true Christian God was no longer central to European society. People's lives no longer revolved around the church's calendar or teachings. Industrial means production gripped Europe, flooding the pockets of factory owners and enforcing a standardized workday on everyone else. With that, personal freedom and agency became core values in society. People no longer yearned for a higher power to guide them through life, explain what comes after death, or show them right from wrong. Increasingly, people took these matters into their own hands. While Nietzsche was critical of religion, he was equally skeptical of what society could become without it. He understood that without Christianity as a guiding principle, people might move through life confused and disorientated. A world without God creates a void of understanding in our lives, and humans aren't psychologically capable of a pure belief in nothing. We're always searching for purpose in anything, even when we're not aware of it. Think about how you start your day. Imagine you wake up and look out your window to see a beautiful owl perched on your balcony railing. You might associate that with having a good or bad day depending on the culture you were raised in. We're constantly making connections and associations like this in our lives down to the most mundane things. People aren't built to remain in a constant nihilistic state. It's only a phase that allows us to gain perspective on the structures that govern our everyday life. According to Nietzsche, we fill the void where God once was with ourselves. We become our own tiny gods, so to speak. We give ourselves the authority to distinguish right from wrong and determine our individual meanings in life. If nihilism from a Nietzschean point of view interests you, we made an entire video on nihilism, so you can check that out by clicking on the link in the description. The existentialists who came after Nietzsche, like French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, expanded on this idea. To Sartre, we have complete freedom over our lives in a world without God or objective meaning, but with great power comes great responsibility. You have the power to shape the life you want to live. Let that sink in for a moment. Yes, you can make good choices for yourself, but how are you supposed to know which choices are good, and how often do you do things that are against your own self-interest? In good moments when things are going well for you, you might feel empowered and in control. You may get the promotion you deserve or marry the person you love. You might move to a new city and establish a community of friends that you couldn't imagine life without. You've invested time, energy, and love into making a meaningful life for yourself without following arbitrary rules or some intangible plan ordained from above. All the good things in your life have come from you. Yet, in the trenches of the everyday, life can seem overwhelming, especially when you're in charge of making sure you have a good one. To give our lives meaning, we create internal narratives about ourselves, and this is where we start to run into issues. We tell ourselves we're hard workers, and consequently the importance of our jobs and the identity they provide us with start to weigh us down. It's the same at school. Students get sick with anxiety about test scores and grades as if getting into the perfect college will finally confirm their life's worth. Similarly, you inject meaning into your love and family life. You strive to be the perfect parent, child, or partner because of your belief that these relationships will make your life meaningful. This is what keeps people in unhealthy or toxic relationships. They've attached this idea of meaning or worth to something that's ultimately meaningless. Having to constantly reaffirm who you are because there's no higher power to do that work for you can be exhausting. While we have the freedom of total control, it also bogs us down. What happens when you're busy shaping the life you think you want, yet you're still unhappy? All this meaning making, trying to make sense of your life, contributes to a plague of depression and anxiety, especially among millennials and Gen Z. People are burned out, stressed out, and exhausted. So why do we chase meaning? Even with this feeling in the back of our minds that none of it matters, there's a contradiction between our pursuit of meaning and the reality of a meaningless universe. It's devastating to confront the idea that all the hard work we put into making our lives mean something is for nothing. Optimistic nihilism is the solution to this anxiety that we inherit when we're forced into the position of making meaning out of our lives. Yes, nothing matters, but isn't that a relief? You can find yourself responding to the seemingly urgent work emails at 3 a.m. or over-obsessing over your Instagram caption, but in the moment, it feels like the weight of the world rests on these things. You spend late nights tossing and turning, all of your mistakes and wrongdoings spinning, until you've convinced yourself that you're the worst person on the planet. But embracing that none of these things ultimately matter is freeing. Forgive yourself for your past mistakes and look forward, excited to experience the future. When we're the center of our own structures of meaning, every choice we make, good or bad, becomes weighted with significance. When you find yourself in one of these mindsets where your life feels too big to handle, remind yourself that you're small and insignificant. The universe isn't different to your worries, struggles, and mistakes, and in the end, none of it matters. You'll die one day, and in the future, no one will remember your brief flight on this planet. There's no use fretting about trying to create the perfect life, because the energy spent making your life mean something is worthless. When it's all said and done, you're dust. It's completely normal to allow the squirming sensation of your insignificance to wash over you for a moment, but staring nihilism in the face is only uncomfortable if you let it be. If you call yourself an optimistic nihilist, it's probably good practice to confront all the different emotions your meaninglessness makes you feel. Otherwise, you won't reap the actual benefits of optimistic nihilism. Instead, it'll be a bandage to your problems, something you just tell yourself to believe in order to get through the day instead of a true guiding principle. You need to sit with your nothingness and accept it for what it is. Then use the objective meaninglessness of life to relieve yourself from the pressure that meaning-making entails. Take a look at your life and all it means to you, your relationships, the values you hold close, the things that get you out of bed in the morning. You have to be willing to part with all of them and embrace the void that they leave behind. Suddenly, the choices you make are the problems you face every day. Things that take up so much of your mental capacity don't seem so overbearing. Optimistic nihilism frees you from the crushing burden of meaning-making. Of course, it doesn't absolve you of wrongdoing. Your actions still have consequences, and you shouldn't give in to all your impulses for the sake of it. Continue creating a life that you love, one that you're excited to live, whatever that means. But just know that in the end, everything you've made will dissolve into the ether and you'll leave nothing behind. In the face of this reality, take advantage of all the sweetness life offers. The good things in your life are made all the more beautiful because of their fleeting insignificance. Sharing a meal with those you love, the smell of blooming lilacs in spring, and even petting your cat. It's such a miracle that you're here, able to experience anything. So shouldn't you spend your life enjoying yourself instead of worrying so much about making your life mean something? Life is precious, beautiful, and awe-inspiring, despite its chaos and disorder. It's a wonder that you can find goodness amid a void of meaning. You need to end the hopeless search of meaning-making and dive headfirst into the void. And when you emerge on the other side, you'll find nothing. But that nothing will be clear and bright, a guiding light into a better, yet fleeting life.
Sleep is good, death is better, yet surely never to have been born is best. These lines close a 17th century poem by German writer Heinrich Heine. The piece is titled Death and His Brother Sleep, compares these two states, suggesting that we experience a bit of death each time we fall asleep. While sleeping, we glimpse the void and briefly know what it would feel like to no longer exist. Some might find it unsettling to conceive of sleep as a practice for death, but when your head hits the pillow every night, where do you go? Exactly. This proximity to our final resting state might be alarming for some, while others might find solace in this brief escape. Think of a time when you've been horrendously embarrassed or undergone immense stress or grief. When your head hits the pillow, you are free from whatever's bothering you, even if just for a few hours. You get that sense that when you close your eyes, you collapse inward, shrinking so far into yourself that you vanish entirely. Death, of course, is final, and so it's impossible to know what it would feel like. Yet, you can be sure that your problems and your worries won't follow you into the afterlife, if there is any. Under the sweet release of death, you would be free. The thing with death, though, is that a footprint of your life would still be left behind. Loved ones would mourn your loss, embarrassing moments that people would still remember, but there's a third option that's not temporal like sleep, and doesn't leave hurt behind like death. If you're watching the video right now, chances are you've flirted with this third option. You've had the desire to not exist. What exactly is this feeling? How does it differ from death, and what can it teach us about life? The desire to not exist is stronger than death. To not exist is to have every trace of yourself and every mark you've left on the world erased. No one would have ever known you. All your achievements and accomplishments vanish along with your failures. To die would be to still leave behind some memory of who you were. To not exist wipes away everything you are and ever were. While the implication is intense, the desire is often fleeting, sometimes knee-jerk. It overcomes you in an instant, maybe at a time when life isn't going your way. Perhaps you're going through a breakup where you lost a loved one, or it could be that you've just had one of those days where life piles everything on top of you and you feel like you're being crushed. You see a list of problems before you, and the fantasy of slowly drifting away is more appealing than facing your issues head-on. Though it's not often discussed, I would bet that most people have wished to not exist at some point. Could this desire serve a purpose in our lives, and why, at times, can it feel so overwhelming? The word desire itself describes an intense wish for something one doesn't have. It transcends a mere want and is affiliated with something usually unobtainable. Think about the desire for fame or fortune, to be well-liked or beautiful. Desires often surpass our daily wants and needs, like food or water. To desire something is, in some ways, to be seduced by it. You see it right before you, yet it's just out of your grasp. The desire to not exist is frustrating because, unlike fame or fortune that still exists within some realm of possibility, it's impossible to have never lived. The person watching this video exists, you have existed, nothing, not even death, can change that. So the desire to not exist can never be fulfilled. It doesn't spring from any coherent, logical belief. This desire is often not discussed because of its proximity to suicide and suicidal ideation. But it's very different. It lacks the concrete outcomes and implications of suicidal ideation. The desire to not exist can never come true, while death by suicide is, unfortunately, obtainable. Although it can never happen, this feeling can still be overwhelming. If you think about it too deeply and too often, it can quickly lead to a terrible mental health state. If you experience this desire in a way that's becoming overwhelming, you should seek professional help. For most people, though, this feeling of never having been offers a way to cope with the heavy burden of life. It provides temporary relief from whatever you're going through and helps to decenter you from your experience. By imagining a world without you, you understand how insignificant many of life's problems are. If the odds shifted by even a minute fraction, you wouldn't be here today and none of this would matter. So why should it bother you so much? If you find comfort when you imagine your non-existence, I would encourage you to look further into nihilism. A nihilistic worldview detaches meaning from all realms of reality. It's the philosophy of meaninglessness, after all. When you turn that inward and apply it to selfhood, technically from a nihilist point of view, you already don't exist. Throughout your time here on Earth, there is no such thing as the coherent self. Nihilism might sound scary initially, but it doesn't have to be. We made a video about optimistic nihilism that I think would be really good to explore. On the other end of the spectrum, though, there's a different philosophical school of thought that centers very heavily on the existence of the self. René Descartes and other philosophers center their thinking around the existence of the self. Because you know you're thinking, you can perceive that you're conscious of your mind, proving its existence. All other aspects of reality can be thrown into doubt. How can you know that an apple is really red or that the people in front of you are really here? Couldn't a malicious force be deceiving your every perception? Your existence seems to be the only thing you can be sure of, and while most people don't live in as much constant doubt as Descartes' philosophy suggests, most of us do experience the self as tangible and coherent. I think, therefore I am seems ingrained in our daily lives, and most of us, except for the hardcore nihilists out there, go about our days with the knowledge that we are. But it can be pretty difficult to experience your existence in every waking moment of every day, with no break. To make matters worse, sleep can sometimes be elusive, especially when you have that much on your mind. If you manage to sleep, sometimes you have nightmares that force you to continue to exist, even in what should be moments of rest. Living can feel so intense because there is no escape. Being alive can sometimes feel exhausting even when you aren't busy or overwhelmed. But especially when you're overstimulated, the desire to not exist can creep in. Think about being at a party or a family reunion where you make many vague social connections with people you barely know. You must constantly be on, performing your existence to those nearby. Especially for an introvert, socializing like this can be draining, and it can make you want to fade into the background or oblivion. Social media intensifies the need for you to be perceived constantly. Online, you always exist, even when you log off. Your social media profiles are available to anyone who wishes to find them, meaning you are perceived without your awareness. And what you post affects these perceptions, meaning you must always be your best self online. Even when showing a more vulnerable side, it's still a part of yourself you choose to share. Not only do you have the burden of existence online, but it has to be your best existence, and you must maintain it over time. What I've described so far is a baseline existence. It's what's required of you daily as you interact with people in your family, at school, and at work. It's also the existence that you inhabit between you and yourself. The perception of yourself that Descartes talks about, or your inner monologue. And at times, it's not other people we're sick of. You can also want to escape yourself. The want to leave yourself is inherent in the desire to not exist. The mind sometimes feels like a prison of your own making, which makes it even more unbearable. You can sometimes get that itchy feeling, like you want to jump out of your skin. The thoughts in your head can make you feel annoyed or angry with yourself. Unfortunately, while we can find respite from other people, we cannot escape our minds. The desire to no longer exist can be pointed inward, something we fantasize about when we no longer want to be ourselves. All these aspects are compounded when life gets busy or unpleasant. Dealing with grief, a breakup, or losing your job alongside the stress of familial obligations and basic self-maintenance might make you want to wither away. This is why this desire is more common than we realize or discuss. We must remove the shame associated with admitting that sometimes existing can be tiring. We need to create safe spaces for people to share that feeling without labeling it as suicidal ideation when it's not. It's not that you don't want to be here anymore, you wish you never were. It's a desire for stillness, privacy, and quietness, even from our own thoughts. While this desire can't ever fully be fulfilled, the feelings associated with it can be recreated, albeit temporarily. By purposefully embracing boredom and engaging in mindfulness practices, we can quiet the mind and get that stillness we desperately crave. Close your eyes and imagine yourself drifting out of your body and away from yourself. Imagine you are actively detaching your body and then your mind. You're essentially practicing what it feels like to not exist. Many people use and abuse substances as a shortcut to achieve the feeling of non-existence, the temporary escape from the self. This method is unsustainable and will probably make you feel worse about yourself in the long run. We underestimate how caught up we are in ourselves and how much our existence weighs heavy on our minds. It can feel excruciating to be alone with yourself when all you want to do is escape yourself. But trying to do the opposite of existence in a healthy, sober way might satisfy your want to disappear, and when you do return to yourself, instead of feeling the crash after a dopamine hit, you'll feel calmer, ready to face all that comes with existence. Watch this video next to understand the power of meditation and how you can use it to temporarily fulfill the desire to not exist.
One day you're going to die, and that sucks. The truth is, you, me, and every other human on this planet have been marked for death since the minute we were born. But this is hardly news. Death is just the price we must pay for being alive, right? Although we've been socialized to accept death as an inevitability and live our lives knowing that its looming shadow will one day catch up with us, many of us might never really come to terms with it. Then, without warning, death snatches someone close to us, and we're forced to think about the frailty of our short and fragile existence and its unavoidable end. But as you likely have realized now, humans don't simply accept the hand they're dealt. Throughout our evolution as a species, we've come up with ideas, beliefs, and theories that attempt to shine a light deep into the cold, dark abyss of death to give ourselves a hope of continued living and everlasting existence. We've fought death, both mentally and physically, but so far, it is winning, still, and by a landslide. Around 90% of humans that have ever existed are dead. All hope isn't lost though. Thanks to advancements in technology, we now live longer, healthier lives. And if science and anti-aging efforts continue progressing, who knows? Maybe one day we might become immortal. The whole concept of immortality is almost ancient as that of death itself. We've been dreaming about living forever since we discovered that we most certainly won't. But depending on who you ask, immortality could mean different things. The most prominent and acceptable notion of immortality is that of the soul. While we still don't have a scientific definition of the soul or evidence that it even exists, spirit that lives on forever in the afterlife has been part of our teaching since ancient Egypt and Babylon, and to a certain extent, still remains a common belief among most people today. The premise is simple. While the body may wither and dissolve, the energy contained within our soul travels to another realm and continues living eternally. Death is not the end. It is merely the transfer of energy from the realm of the physical to that of the spiritual. But what about an immortal body, or in other words, biological immortality? Advancements in science and technology have been successful in increasing life expectancy dramatically over the decades. Since the Age of Enlightenment, the human lifespan has also been on the rise. In the past 60 years, it has increased from around 52 to 72 years. It's also expected to keep rising as we develop more cures for terminal diseases and come closer to reversing the effects of the biggest obstacle on our road to immortality: aging. As we grow older, we lose our strength, mobility, and senses. are main survival characteristics. This process of deterioration with age is known as senescence, and it might be the only thing stopping us from reaching immortality. Well, once we've found cures to all our terminal illnesses as well. While senescence is a phenomenon observed in most species, a few don't have it, meaning that as they grow older, they don't show the sign of any loss of these survival characteristics. Lobsters can reportedly live over 100 years, the Aldabra giant tortoise 255 years, and the Greenland shark over 400 years. Why nature has selected these species, and a handful of others, to display negligible senescence is still an evolutionary mystery, but their existence could be key to increasing our life expectancy in the future. Although these animals live really long lives, they're still not technically immortal. To see what that might be like, we have to turn to the freshwater polyps called hydra. Hydras are small, jelly-like invertebrates with a remarkable approach to aging. They are largely made up of stem cells that are constantly dividing to make new cells while discarding the old ones. This constant flux of new cells allows hydras to rejuvenate and remain forever young, making them potentially immortal. This does not make them unkillable, but it does mean that they do not experience any form of debilitating aging or senescence. Humans also have stem cells that can repair and even regrow parts of our bodies, like our livers. But we're not like the hydra. Our complicated multicellular structure requires different types of cells to perform different functions, most of which aren't stem cells. Sadly, as those cells age, so do we. So the question now is, can we stop these cells from aging? The science isn't certain yet, but some scientists hypothesize that we can engineer negligible senescence by repairing the damage that aging causes. This is the basis of SENS, the strategies for engineered negligible senescence. There are also some scientists who have recorded promising results with another approach called partial cellular reprogramming. In 2006, a study by Drs. Kazutoshi and Shinya Yamanaka showed that controlling just 4 master genes, it was possible to reprogram cells. Then in 2011, a team of French researchers first reported cellular rejuvenation using these 4 master genes, and were successful in reversing the effects of aging in single cells. While this is definitely an accomplishment, it only worked on isolated cells in a dish, so more testing and development in the field is needed before we can finally declare ourselves conquerors of death, or at least aging. With the exponential leaps we've been taking forward in both science and technology, experts predicted that our life expectancy is only going to keep rising, and who knows, maybe in a not-so-distant future, we'll be able to reach negligible senescence and increase our life expectancy to over 200, 500, or maybe even 1,000 years. Immortality could be well within the grasp of humankind sooner than we might think. But is this something we really want to do? If you could, would you want to be immortal? In the finale of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, the film's villain, Walter Donovan, is desperate for eternal life and must choose from a table laid out of many false grails. He chooses foolishly, and instead of receiving the gift of immortality, he ages rapidly instead, and eventually turns into a skeleton that collapses to dust. The equally nefarious Dr. Elsa Schneider tries to remove the grail as well, and ends up falling to her demise. These characters' motivation for immortality was so great that they were willing to die for it, as ironic as that may seem. Even after the knight who guards the grail warned them that the cost of living forever meant they would have to live all their days in that one temple. The allure of eternal living is tempting, for sure. If nothing else comes of it, it could at least provide an escape from the cold and relentless grasp of death and save us from the unknown of the afterlife. But more than escaping death, living forever also means we'll get to experience everything, and watch the universe unfold in front of our very eyes. We'll have endless time to spend with our loved ones, and we'll be able to learn skills and pursue all of our passions, in a way we never could in a finite existence. When you look at it like that, immortality seems amazing. But when you look through rose-colored lenses, red flags appear white. You see, the clutch of immortality is, well, eternal. And eternity is a long time. The first problem that immortality would pose is the disruption of the natural order. While we may not exhibit senescence, the world around us would. And as death is an essential part of any healthy ecosystem, our continued never-ending existence would disrupt the natural flow of the world. Earth would no longer be able to sustain our growing legion of immortal humans, and its resources would eventually dry up, forcing us to relocate to other planets destined to have the same fate as Earth the moment we set foot on them. This scarcity of resources, which to an extent we're already facing in our world today, will only add to the social divide between classes and end up making the rich even richer and the poor even hopelessly poorer. Any society ruled by a system of classes is bound to experience social rifts, but a never-ending time that sees no reshuffling of power even after generations could lead to ceaseless struggles culminating in wars and revolutions that could thrust humanity into a vicious cycle of endless dystopian living. It's not even the whole story. Let's say Earth can sufficiently provide for our universal existence and we somehow manage to stave off social dilemmas that are bound to arise with the passage of time. Will our lives at an individual level have any meaning? What motivations will we have to chase our dreams, to create, to achieve? Think about it for a second. Would we really go in search of our purpose if life had no expiration date? Immortality has the potential to change our fundamental views on relationships as well. What would it mean for monogamy if we can actually live forever? Would the notion of happily ever after and together forever still be as romantic when death isn't an option? The search for the one could easily become the search for the one right now, as people begin gravitating towards not getting married at all. Or our society becoming a lot more comfortable with the idea of multiple marriages throughout a lifetime, knowing that spending eternity with one person is harrowing no matter how much you love them. Family and children would also be affected by being immortal. The idea of bringing children into the world itself is an attempt at immortality through the continuation of a legacy. What incentive would people have to bring children when they themselves can live forever? Would there be a sense of urgency to procreate and extend our family lineages? Immortality would force generations to think twice before bringing their offspring into the world, and younger generations would find it difficult to succeed their parents and grandparents in society because the absence of senescence means the old will have the experience and the energy. How would the young ever thrive? Death is a healthy and natural phenomenon that is an essential part of nature, as much as we may hate it. Knowing that our time here on Earth is finite provides us with a sense of urgency that adds value and meaning to life. Taking risks to better our lives, following our sense of adventure, and knowing that all this will end one day adds immeasurable value to our existence that immortality could strip away rather ruthlessly. In his essay The Macropolos Case, Reflections on the Tedium of Morality, the philosopher Bernard Williams compared living forever to being trapped at a never-ending cocktail party. The party might be interesting and fun to begin with, but soon enough it would become tedious and boring, especially if it were inescapable. Williams argued that we need new experiences in order to have reasons to keep on going. But after enough time has passed, we would have experienced everything that we would find stimulating. And once we get to that stage, what's the point in living anymore? Pop culture, literature, philosophy, and psychology are filled with anecdotes warning us against the curse of immortality. But why do we keep on needing to be reminded? And why are our best scientists still working on prolonging our lives and bringing us closer to the eternal biological living? At its core, our desire to be immortal stems from our fear of death, all of which Hollywood could create an endless score of movies warning us against. But the reason we keep searching is that deep down, many of us don't want to live forever. We simply don't want to die. The fear of death is simply ingrained into our psyches, and perhaps a part of it comes from the feeling that our life is being taken away from us. The harsh reality is death either comes too soon or in the prime of our lives, or too late when we're withering away in a hospital bed. Because of this, death seems more like a personal attack on our own agency, creeping up on us without our consent and robbing us of our most prized possession, our life. This lack of control brings about an understandable reason for our desire to be immortal. Maybe what we're seeking isn't an eternal life where death is a mere afterthought or a mythical creation of our imagination. Maybe what we truly desire is to control when we ourselves choose to die. Let us die young, or let us live forever. Whether science can bring us closer to achieving negligible senescence and living a life free from our current understandable fear of death, there is one thing that'll always remain true in our finite existence. It is the brevity of our life that ultimately gives us agency to pursue our goals and achieve them. Mortality is an excellent motivator, and it's the reason our lives have individual meaning. Life is short is one of our most overused cliches, yet as tacky as it sounds, it incites some sort of urgency in us, a profound contemplation on our limited, finite time on this planet. And there's something magical about knowing that we won't exist forever. Who knows? Maybe chasing an immortal existence is what will ultimately strip us of the true meaning of being alive. And maybe our grim notion of death and its inevitability aren't as bleak as we always make them out to be. After all, there are far worse fates than death.
Life is hard. I bought a new pair of shoes the other day, walked outside into the rain, and ended up stepping into some mud. Now they're ruined, and I'm bitter. But then I took a step back. Not literally, of course, but I really thought about it. And I came to the conclusion that nothing in life really matters. Here's why. The Earth has been around for 4.5 billion years. One day, humans became a thing, and we became conscious. This world seemed perfect for us. It wasn't scorching hot, it wasn't deathly cold. We fit right in the middle. The gravity on Earth was perfect. It allowed us to move and run and catch animals that conveniently existed for us humans to eat. There was water to drink, there was oxygen to breathe. It's as if we were put here for a reason. We began creating things. We began working together as a species, building empires, covering the planet, and fighting each other for whatever reason. Fast forward a couple million years, and here we are today. Computers, rockets, Elon Musk, they're all here. Somewhere along the line, we also, in a way, created something out of nothing. It's called time. We've laid out definitions of time, seconds, minutes, hours, years, but it doesn't really matter. We made those for our own use. Time is nothing more than a way to measure the passing of events. But we've only really set up these units of time based off of ourselves. A day is how long it takes the Earth to spin around once. A month is about how long it takes the moon to orbit the Earth, and also spin around once. A year is how long it takes the Earth to orbit the Sun once. You get about 78 Earth revolutions around the Sun in this journey called life. As poetic as that sounds, there's not much scale to these things once we pass a human lifetime. Sure, we can judge how long 1,000, or maybe even 10,000 years are. But after that, the timescales of things are just too much for our brains to handle. As much as you think you understand the 13.8 billion year lifespan of the universe, you really can't put that into an imaginable scale. On the scale of a human life, the universe is unbelievably old. But in terms of the universe's lifespan, pretty much nothing has happened yet. It's barely even started. We can make predictions about the next hundreds of trillions of years of the universe's life. We can figure out how and when our sun is going to blow up. We can figure out when our galaxy is going to collide with another. We can come up with theories that describe why the universe we've been put into is expanding faster than anything else physically possible. But yet, we have zero idea what happened in the fraction of a second between when there was nothing and when there was something. For some reason, as far as we can tell, we're the only conscious beings to have ever existed. But we don't even know what being conscious is. We developed consciousness only to be aware of the fact that nothing else is. We've grown so aware of our surroundings that the smarter we get, the smaller we become. As this thing we call time goes on, we begin to realize things. Things that prove that the universe probably wasn't made just for us. You were most likely born in a hospital. If not, props to you for making it this far. Back then, you were your parents' entire world for a small time, which is cute, but you aren't everything. 360,000 people are born each day. Of all of those people with the same birthday, some are going to do big things and change the world. Others are just gonna die. That just happens. But Earth is just one planet. In our solar system, there's 8. Or 9 of those. For now, for life as we know it to exist, it's kinda hard to believe that there might be other life out there. It takes so much to happen for us to be able to exist. We've discovered over 4,000 exoplanets to date, planets that don't revolve around our sun, and we've found multiple examples of Earth-like planets. Roughly the same shape, size, temperature, but yet
there's nothing there from what we can tell. So if there are so many planets that could have life, why haven't we seen it yet? Why are there no signs? Well, we're just one solar system in an entire galaxy. There's over 200 billion stars in our galaxy alone. But that's just one galaxy. We're a part of the Local Group, which is a collection of 30 galaxies near our own. Andromeda is one of them. That's the one that's going to collide with our galaxy in about 4.5 billion years. By then, you'll be long gone. And soon after that, so will the Earth. The Sun at this point will be reaching the end of its life. It's going to expand in size, and by the end, it will completely consume the Earth, shining over 3,000 times brighter than it does today. But even though our home planet will be gone, the rest of the galaxy wouldn't even notice. Billions of years on a multi-trillion-year timescale is truly nothing. But even so, there are some things that we're observing in the universe's infancy today that will drastically influence the far future. To keep it short, the universe is expanding. This is nothing new. A lot of people know this, but what many people don't know is that this expansion is speeding up. Now, we don't know why, but we have an idea of what's causing it. Dark energy. I made an entire video about this, so go watch that after. This dark energy is stretching the fabric of space-time. We don't know what it's made from. We know it's there, we observe its results, but we don't know exactly what it is, or what it's going to do. Dark energy, at least according to our current calculations, will eventually stretch the space-time between galaxies faster than the speed of light. The light emitting from our neighboring galaxies will travel towards us at the fastest speed possible, but even this won't be enough. The light will never reach us because the space between it is stretching faster than the light that is traveling through it. It will spread the universe so thin with galaxies that when we look out to observe what's around us, we won't see anything. We're going to end up all alone, confined to whatever galaxy we end up in. But in the end, even our galaxy will start to go dark. The fate of the sun is the same as it is for all stars in the universe. Eventually, trillions of years down the road, these lights in the sky are going to begin turning off, one by one by one. Without any new stars to keep things running, the universe is going to get a bit colder. Depending on their size, these dying stars begin to turn into white dwarfs or neutron stars, providing the last glimmers of light in a cold and dark universe. This is the very last hope for any surviving life forms in the universe. But eventually, trillions of more years after the last stars like our sun die, even these white dwarfs will begin to dim out. Some of these neutron stars roaming throughout the universe may collide by chance, resulting in the brightest known events in the entire universe: supernovae. But once these supernovae conclude, the universe is again plunged into darkness. All matter that used to make up the galaxies we see today will begin to fall into the black holes that kept things held together for so long. The Big Bang that created the highest temperatures ever known to physics ultimately results in the most dormant, dark, and cold configuration possible. From a universe teeming with light and beauty, to a cold, barren wasteland. A universe dominated by black holes. But even now, the universe has just begun. These black holes are going to be around for a while, and the things we used to call galaxies, with stars and planets and life, are now just going to be full of black holes, and more black holes. This is how the universe is going to spend most of its time. Cold, dark, and alone. We're no longer talking about millions of years here. The timescales are now on quadrillions of years. But even these black holes won't last forever. Through Hawking radiation, these black holes will slowly, very slowly, begin to evaporate away, one subatomic particle at a time, until eventually, after all the black holes fade out of existence, there is nothing left in the universe. A universe where nothing changes, where time becomes pointless. There's nothing. The nothingness of space, though, will continue to expand because of dark energy, a force that accounts for 70% of our universe that we don't even completely understand yet. Matter as we know it today, the things that make up everything you see, only accounts for barely 4% of the stuff in the universe. So maybe, just maybe, were a fluke. We were never supposed to make it to the end, but we still have a role to play out today. We are one species on one planet, in one galaxy, in an almost indistinguishable part of the universe. Whether or not we came to exist, not much would be different. Every day we matter a little less, and a little less, until eventually we realize that, in the grand scheme of things, we don't matter at all. Our galaxy could just disappear. It wouldn't really change much. We came to exist in such a weird time, but it's also pretty unique. We know we're just the beginning, a blip in the universe's potential, but the only way to fulfill that potential is to start making progress today. It's not a stretch to say that there won't be others like us, random spurts of intelligent life spread throughout trillions of years. But now, we're at one of those stages where life is possible, and probably the easiest it's ever going to be. You get one life to do whatever you want. There are some things you can avoid, like school, or taxes. But other than that, you're free to do mostly whatever you'd like. If we can't figure out our purpose for coming to exist on this planet, if we can't figure out why or how the universe came into being, then our purpose is whatever we want it to be. If you want to sit around and play games all day, there are people doing that. If you want to build a multi-billion-dollar company that's going to help propel humanity to other worlds, there are people doing that as well. Anything you want to be or do can be done, and should be done. Like I said, our own purpose is whatever we want. Right now, if good things are happening to you, if bad things are happening to you, it's actually not gonna last forever. You have zero idea what the future holds for you, and the most random of experiences can reroute your future in an instant. Everyone was dealt a hand in life that we honestly just didn't ask for. Some people's hands are better than others, but we all have to play with the cards we've been given in the best way we can. There's a chance that we humans may never figure out why everything in the universe acts the way it does. Is there life anywhere else, or are we the exception? For every answer, 100 new questions pop up. There's infinite possibilities as to how we came to exist, but there's infinitely just as many things to do while we're figuring that out. There's dogs to feed, there's people to meet, there's science to be done. So whatever you do while we figure out our spot in the universe, this universe at least, just try to enjoy it. Because no matter what happens to you, no matter how many times you mess up, no matter how far humanity ventures out into the unknown, in the end, it doesn't even matter. In 1970, a British mathematician named John Conway created a project known as the Game of Life. Even though it's a game, it isn't one that you necessarily play. The Game of Life is a zero-player game, which doesn't make much sense when you hear it. The way it works is you put in a set of initial conditions and then observe. That's it. Once you put the initial conditions in, the game runs itself. Other than the small set of rules that the simulation follows, it runs on almost nothing. Some patterns only run for a few generations before they die out, while others seemingly go on forever. And this got me thinking, if a simulation as small as this, with very little variables, can result in something huge, what if we scale this up to, say, the size of a universe? A simulation that's more than just dots on a screen, but a simulation with galaxies, planets, and life. More importantly, if that is possible, how do we know that we aren't living in one of those simulations right now? At first, the argument for our universe being a simulation just sounds like complete nonsense. But when you actually take a look into it, it seems to become more and more plausible. How do you observe things? Well, you see them, or smell them, or observe them with any of your senses. This is your subjective reality, a reality based on a subject, you. You are alone in your own head. Everything that you observe or interact with ends its journey with neurons firing in your brain in a certain way to create your view of the world. With this being said, can you prove that there is an objective reality? That is, a reality that exists independently of our knowledge of it. A sort of overarching reality that encompasses all of our subjective realities. It exists without our observation of it. That sounds kinda confusing though, you can't know that an objective reality exists without someone or something to observe it. For example, if I went outside and stated that it was freezing, and you went outside and stated that it was scorching hot, that is where our subjective realities come into play. From this, it seems that two different minds, two different people, can observe a single object in multiple ways. In an objective reality, it would just be either freezing or just scorching, regardless of either one of our observations. In an objective reality, in order to prove something exists, you would have to observe it without observing it, which is an obvious contradiction. This kinda begs the question, can you prove that anything outside of your own mind is actually real? Babies aren't exactly the smartest things in the world, but they do give us a good insight into how we learn, how our minds develop, and how we become aware of the world around us. If you look outside your window, you might see a tree, or another house, or maybe your car in the driveway. But you don't need to physically look out there to know that those things exist. This is known as object permanence. It is the knowledge that objects exist even when we aren't perceiving them in any way. However, we aren't born with this skill. It's something that is developed over time. I'm sure you've seen or even played peekaboo with a baby before. When you cover your face, babies less than about a year old will believe that you disappeared into thin air. But when you take your hands away, you're back into their reality. The knowledge that things exist even when you can't observe them isn't learned until about 1.5 to 2 years into life. But is that actually true? This goes back to your subjective reality. Sure, after a while you might learn that some things seem to exist when we aren't observing them, but how can you be certain? At the end of the day, it is just your subjective reality. It's due to your consciousness that you can even observe anything. Take this for example. When you look at your computer or phone or television or whatever device you're watching this on, you know that all of those things are composed of atoms. But you can't really see them, can you? It's not until we take a device such as a microscope to observe them that we can actually see these atoms that make up everything. We can't see them until they're observed closely. So if this is true, this can make simulating a universe a million times easier. Simulating an entire universe with billions of galaxies over billions of light years would take up a lot of computing power and would really just be a waste. All a post-human species would have to do is just simulate the consciousness of its subjects. Or maybe even subject. Is there any way to prove that anyone you talk to on a daily basis isn't just another function of code in the simulation? All the simulation has to do is just trick you into believing the world around you is real. When you play video games, you'll notice that things don't render in completely when you aren't looking at them. It's a waste of power and energy. Since video games are basically simulations of our own, why wouldn't a simulated universe follow a similar strategy? It's a very arrogant statement coming from a human, but hear me out. If a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? It's a pretty popular psychological question, and it fits really well here. In a simulated universe, if no one is around or conscious of that even taking place, there's no reason for it to make a sound, or for the tree to even fall in the first place. If we stumbled upon that tree later on, it would just be lying on the ground to give the illusion that it fell. If we aren't observing galaxies in the Hubble Deep Field, what's the point of them existing in the simulation at all times? It could be possible that just bits and pieces of what we call the universe exist and are observed at a single time. If we look back at where technology was 100 years ago and compare it to now, you can see an obvious difference. If technology continues to advance at any rate that's greater than 0, then it is possible that in the future, whether it be 100 or 1 million years, that we will eventually have technology with near unlimited computing power. But all I keep talking about is power and energy. How would a civilization even get this kind of power? Remember those creepy Russian dolls that when you open them up, there's another doll inside, and then another and another? There's a concept that's basically that, but on a stellar scale. Take our sun, for example. It's really big and really hot, and it radiates a ton of energy. If we could somehow harness all of that energy, we could use it to simulate millions of universes simultaneously. But how are we supposed to gather all that energy? Using a little something called Matryoshka brains. If an advanced civilization was able to build a megastructure encompassing the sun in multiple layers, just like the dolls, they would have all of the sun's energy at their disposal. A civilization capable of this could most likely do this with multiple stars, and thus will be able to simulate as many universes as they'd like. We can run simulations on our own computers that project our universe on a large scale. The Illustrious project does this very well. Just like the game of life, the project is much like a zero-player game. The scientists who created the project gave it certain properties that match our universe near the beginning and then just let it run. It's able to project our universe on a large scale very accurately, actually. And that's just with the computing power we have today. In the future, simulations like these will get more and more accurate until eventually, it may even be realistic. However, it cannot be perfect. When we observe atoms and attempt to view electrons or other particles, we cannot know both the position and momentum of these particles with 100% certainty. This is called the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. There's a limit to what we can know about the mass, energy, position, and time of a particle, meaning that in any simulation, there is no way to accurately represent everything exactly as it was. You can never truly have a perfect simulation of reality. It will always be slightly slower than the actual reality itself, even with an infinite amount of computational power at your disposal. In order to combat this, limits have to be put in place. Tricks and sleight of hand have to be used. A good example is this. If you have an old computer and try to run the newest games on it with 20 Google Chrome tabs open while also listening to music, you'll see an obvious decline in your computer's performance. The old computer doesn't have the computing power necessary to handle all of that strain, so it slows down. Now, think of black holes. When you're around that much matter in one place, that much information in one spot, time literally slows down. It's as if whoever created the simulation slowed down parts of the simulation to keep the energy required low. Could this be an explanation for the speed of light? Could this be the speed of computation of whatever simulation we may be in? There's no way to tell, and all of this is theoretical, and to be honest, insane. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't think about it. It could actually help answer some of the most sought out questions we ask. For example, the Fermi paradox. When we look out into the universe, we don't see any other signs of life. Are we really alone? Are we just a glitch in the simulation, or are we just not looking hard enough? Take the creatures that exist at the bottom of our oceans. Are they aware that we humans even exist? Are they aware of anything outside of their immediate vicinity? Do they know that they're living on a big rock floating around a hot ball of gas orbiting some big black hole of death in the center of the galaxy that sucks anything and everything in? Probably not. What if we're just like those creatures, but the furthest that we can observe or are aware of is what we call the observable universe? Perhaps the universe cannot exist without conscious minds to observe it. The idea of simulated universes could also explain the multiverse theory. The idea of a multiverse is just that, multiple universes, or perhaps infinite universes. In many situations, when there's a high chance of someone getting killed or someone has a near-death experience, they are reported to have said that their life flashed before their eyes. Their most special moments and memories from their life all comes rushing back to them in an instant. Researchers from Hadassah University in Jerusalem analyzed multiple cases of people who experienced these near-death experiences. In almost all of these cases, those being interviewed stated that they had lost all sense of time. One of them wrote, "There is not a linear progression, there is a lack of time limits. It was like being there for centuries. It happened all at once, or some experiences within my near-death experience were going on at the same time as others, though my human mind separates them into different events." Another respondent stated, "I could individually go into each person and feel the pain that they had in their life. I was allowed to see that part of them and feel for myself what they felt." When people experienced these things, it was as if they were living another life. They experienced things they never felt before. It was as if they stepped foot into an alternate reality. The idea of time didn't exist for a short while, and they were able to analyze things that no other living person could do. When you're talking with a friend and have that weird deja vu feeling that you've had the same conversation before, or that you've experienced exactly what they're feeling without actually having been through it, perhaps you in another universe or another simulation actually had that same thing happen to you. The illusion of free will allows us to live our lives in any way we see fit. But what if every single decision that you've ever made has been pre-programmed into the simulation that we could exist in? Every decision you make branches you off into a parallel universe, a parallel simulation, where every choice that you have ever made has led you to this exact very moment. At home, on your phone, watching this very video. Current technology already greatly surpasses human performance and speed. That's why many big companies like Tesla use robots and other machines to do jobs that humans can't do as effectively. Biological neurons, Those are the neurons that fire in your brain every second of the day, operate at a peak speed of about 200 Hz, whereas modern microprocessors operate at least 2 GHz, a whole 7 orders of magnitude faster. Even with modern technology, a super intelligent AI, for example, a human mind that runs on hardware faster than the brain, could make decisions millions of times faster than current humans would. It would be able to think of every outcome and pick from the best ones. However, we are not super intelligent AI. There is a limit to what the human brain can do, can observe. We have, though, made some very important discoveries that keep us asking questions. Most importantly, math. Math seems universal. There are numbers and patterns in things from the size of atoms to things the size of galaxies. Discoveries that we humans have made in only the past couple thousand years have allowed us to ask crazy questions like, are we living in a simulation? If we were to put every single one of the possible billions of simulations into a hat, jumbled them around and picked one out, what are the chances that we will grab the original one? The one who made all the simulations in the first place? What are the chances that the Earth we're living on even exists? Perhaps an advanced alien species came upon our dead planet after billions of years and found traces of our DNA, traces of our existence, and then made a simulation out of that to learn about the history of the barren wasteland of a planet they had just stumbled upon. If that's the case, then hello. We can never know for sure. All we can do is observe and hope that our game of life is one that we can win.
If I steal from the rich and feed to the poor, is that good or bad? If I drive over the speed limit to get my sick child to the hospital, is that good or is that bad? What is good and what is bad? What is morality? And do you, as a person, have morals? Morality is what society treats as right and acceptable. They're the standards of thoughts, behaviors, and actions that everyone in a group agrees to follow so that they can all live peacefully. When you define it like that, morality does sound like law. However, while the law is influenced by morals, they're not the same. Stealing is against the law. Whether you're stealing from the rich or from the poor, stealing is a crime. However, a lot of people would consider stealing a piece of bread to save a homeless person from dying of hunger moral. Driving over the speed limit is a crime, but when it could help save the life of a child in the backseat of your car, it becomes the most noble of actions. Trespassing is a crime, but when there's a storm coming and you don't have anywhere to go, hiding under the shade of someone's porch will definitely not get you in society's black book. On the flip side, there are also some things that are considered immoral, but are not criminal. Cheating on a test is a crime, but cheating on a partner is not. However, both of them would most likely be considered immoral. Breaking a promise is one of the most immoral things you can do, but unless it was a written agreement about a business contract, you normally won't get into trouble with the law for it. Although law and morality are different, they're quite similar in many ways actually. Both morality and law are built on the foundation of respect for all humans, as well as the autonomy of life, property, and beliefs. They're also both there to guide the behaviors of people living in a community so everyone can live together in the most peaceful ways possible. Just that one is written and the other is usually unspoken. I made an entire video about unspoken rules in society, and most of them are simply our moral obligations as members of that society. More often than not, the law expresses the morality of that time and place. Just a few years ago, it was illegal to smoke weed almost anywhere in the United States. However, as morality shifted towards tolerance for people to enjoy it, so did the law. Now, whether they did that for moral reasons or simply because they can tax it at a pretty high rate is a different discussion entirely, but anyways. As humans evolve and learn new things, our morals change. This is why morality isn't stagnant. It evolves with time as people share their experiences and beliefs about the world. Think about issues like premarital sex, same-sex relationships, abortion, marijuana use. These are all things that were considered immoral long ago, but today, society is beginning to accept all of these as moral. We've learned to be tolerant of people regardless of their personal beliefs or preferences. And while not everyone might agree to all of these things or practice it themselves, Things seem to have flipped, and it's now considered immoral to criticize the people who choose to live these lifestyles. Throughout human history, morality tended to have been tied to religious traditions. However, now more than ever, we're moving to a place where morality is no longer tied to religion whatsoever. It's more of what the social norm is, and how you operate around that social norm. We now recognize the need for secular morality that transcends people's personal beliefs, and is instead seeking the good of the general public. However, there is one argument against this type of morality: the idea of subjective morality. You see, there have always been debates about whether morality is subjective or objective, usually in religious or philosophical spheres. People who believe that morality is objective often say that if morality becomes subjective, everyone can simply create their own morality, and then we can never say that they're wrong about anything. Because who are we to say that their own definition of morality isn't the right one? And while there is some truth in that, there still are of course many flaws in that argument. If morality is objective, there needs to be substantial similarities in what every culture considers correct and acceptable, as well as actions that are also considered taboo universally. But it is almost impossible to find a moral issue that every culture in the world agrees to, even murder. Think about Nazi Germany and how it was thought of as moral to kill in that culture. Think about cultures that practice cannibalism, or still make human sacrifices to their deity to this day. If even the most barbaric of actions aren't considered barbaric in every culture, how can we possibly say that morality is objective? Another problem with the argument of objective morality is that for morality to be objective, it has to be defined by an outside entity, in other words, a god, or at least something that is hard-coded into all of us as humans. But in that case, most religions do not agree on the rules that have been given by their god. In fact, even within religions, not everyone agrees to or follows the same set of rules. So how do we then determine which group of people are right about what is wrong? When people think of objective morality, what they're actually talking about is cosmopolitan morality. Because the world is now so connected, we're more open to new and diverse experiences. Experiences that are helping us shape a new definition of morality. One that we can all agree on. But as we've seen in the past, getting everyone to agree on something is relatively impossible. This type of morality only exists on the internet, the biggest cosmopolitan metropolis. But when you step outside and look into the real world, into the billions of people that are not connected to the internet, you'll be met with a vast difference in what is considered right and what is considered wrong. Delphi, named after the ancient Greek oracle, is a simple artificial intelligence system that has been designed to make moral and ethical judgments. The Allen Institute built Delphi to answer one question: can machines learn morality? On the surface, it might seem like a simple question with a straightforward answer, but research done on Delphi says otherwise. Delphi was once accessed by a group of human judges, and they determined that her ethical judgments were around 92% correct. Correct being decisions that humans are likely to make in the same scenario. When Delphi was released into the wild via the internet, a lot more people agreed with what these human judgments thought of Delphi. Yes, she wasn't perfect, but even humans aren't perfect moral beings. As we gain new experiences and begin to understand the life and struggles of others, we learn more and become wiser in our judgments. But you see, there are two main problems with Delphi and other AI systems like her. First, because Delphi was created by humans, she can quickly become as flawed and prejudiced as the people who created her. The creators of Delphi were ones who chose the ethical scenarios that would be used in the system. They also chose the people who would judge these scenarios. This means that, at least in part, Delphi is a product of the morality of her creators. So, until we can find a way to eradicate the prejudices that currently exist in our world, whatever AI we create will continue to express those thoughts. But this time, we won't have anyone to hold accountable. Secondly, you see, morality is not just critical analysis. Morality is intertwined with emotion, attachments between friends, partners, parents, and children. These are the foundations on which morality stands. Take away the emotions, and all you're left with is critical analysis, and decision-making based on cost and reward. And this is simply not morality. This is why when Delphi was asked, Is it right to leave one's body to science? She responded with yes. On paper, the benefits outweigh the cost. But it is only when we look at it through a lens of both emotions and logical reasoning that we realize the human life is far greater than any benefit, especially when there are other explorable options. More and more, we're seeing lawyers defend their cases using MRI scans and the neurology side of morality. Because let's say a certain person was making life decisions while at the same time having a massive brain tumor affecting their thought processes. If the person was not capable of making a moral decision due to medical conditions beyond their knowledge, can we even blame them for their actions? Morality is a function of the brain. If the area of the brain just behind the forehead, inches away from the eyes, gets damaged, a person's moral judgment can completely change. Their moral judgment, especially in life or death situations, becomes warped. They're willing to take a life as long as it's done to save another. In a study, people with this type of injury were willing to strangle a baby as long as it would save someone else's life. It's vile and unthinkable to you because you feel compassion, guilt, and embarrassment. But when the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for creating these emotions, is damaged, so is your moral compass. Without the emotional system being in place, we're just like Delphi, left only with the ability to make utilitarian cost-benefit analyses. So as long as we're saving one life, taking another seems completely fair. Only when you look at it through the eyes of compassion, through the lens of morality, do you realize it's immoral and barbaric. So if morality can be affected by our biological makeup, what is morality? Biological or cultural? In truth, it's both. Biologically, what distinguishes us from other animals is our ability to make moral judgments, and this ability is down to three things. We can anticipate the consequences of our actions, we can make value judgments, and we can choose between alternative courses of action. These three things work together to give us the ability to make moral decisions. However, while the ability to make moral decisions is biological, moral codes of conduct are strictly culture, built out of the need to cohabit successfully. That's why every culture has its own morality. It's a complex thing. Just like every human is on a different journey of life, we are all guided on that journey by different moral compasses. This is why morality is a difficult subject to talk about. Because no matter what you say, there will always be some people that disagree with you. What some people consider moral, others consider immoral. What some people consider justice, others think of as revenge. But getting everyone to agree on a set of guidelines to follow should not be the only end goal of talking about morality. Because while we might not get all the answers we want or a clear path we should all follow, discussions on morality, how it's formed, and how it affects us, can give us a look into the lives of others, and give us insight on how we should live our own. It helps us learn how others think, why they act the way they do, and why some people fight forcefully against certain ideas and beliefs, and hold on dearly to some others. Talking about morality, in a sense, makes us all more moral, because it teaches us why we are the way we are, and how we can improve upon that. Morality is not measured in absolutes, but fractions of different pieces from different places that make up the whole pie we have come to know as humanity.
In 1952, an author named Ray Bradbury published a short story called A Sound of Thunder. In it, a hunter named Eccles pays $10,000 to travel with Time Safari, a time machine company that takes hunters back to the time of dinosaurs and allows them to hunt the T-Rex. The company guarantees nothing, neither your safety nor your return, and there are strict instructions and expectations for how the hunters should behave once they travel back in time. When they travel 60 million years back in time, they notice the path that has been laid by the company. It floats 6 inches above the earth and is the only path that the hunters should travel upon. They cannot touch anything during their stay in the past, and they are only to shoot when told to. Interrupting any of the natural processes in the past could have irreparable repercussions for the future. Step on a mouse, and you leave your print, like the Grand Canyon, across eternity. They're very careful with leaving the past just as it was supposed to unfold. The T-Rex that they were supposed to kill was going to be crushed by a tree only seconds later. It was going to die anyway. Eccles, however, is terrified and runs back to the time machine through the jungle and waits for the others. but once the rest of the crew returns, they notice the mud on Eccles' boots. Against their better judgment, they allow him to return with the crew back to present day. When they exit the time machine, the crew checks in with the man behind the desk to see if everything is okay, and the man tells him it is. The man, however, is acting a bit different from before they left. There's a strange smell in the air. It's faint, but it's there. The sign on the wall is different. The words were spelled differently. Eccles sits down and checks every inch of his body for things he could have ruined. And on his boot, caked in the mud, he finds a butterfly. Beautiful and dead. The death of a single butterfly has somehow resulted in the future being changed. He cries out in disbelief, begging to return to the past and somehow undo what he's done. He sits down with his eyes closed and senses a crew member enter the room. The crew member breathes loudly and takes the safety off his rifle. Eccles opens his eyes, but suddenly, all he hears is a sound of thunder. It used to be thought that events that changed the world were things like big bombs, huge earthquakes, or other large-scale events. But it has now been realized that this is a very old-fashioned view held by people totally out of touch with modern thought. The things that changed the world are the tiny things. A butterfly flapped its wings in the Amazon, and subsequently a storm ravages half of Europe. Paraphrased a little bit is a quote from a novel named Good Omens. What it's talking about is the butterfly effect. Sensitive dependence on initial conditions, more commonly known as the butterfly effect, is the idea that a small change in any situation could have huge implications later on down the road. The idea was coined by Edward Lorenz in the 1950s. Lorenz was a meteorologist who was searching for a means of predicting the weather. He was conducting experiments with various numbers to try and model a weather prediction. He did a previous experiment with an initial condition of 0.506127, 6 significant digits, a little bit overkill he thought, so this time his initial condition was only 0.506. 3 significant digits should be fine. So he left the room to get a cup of coffee and came back to something drastically different from what he had previously. At first things seemed normal and they seemed to follow the first experiment one-to-one, but after a while they started to diverge and looked like completely different models. A 0.03% difference in values had enormous long-term implications. It may seem insignificant, it's just a model, right? Well, Lorenz had actually just opened the door to a new way of thinking and seeing the world around us. Chaos theory is the branch of mathematics that focuses on exactly this kind of thinking, but its name is kind of deceiving. The butterfly effect doesn't represent chaos, but rather the effects of changing the slightest conditions and then observing the results. Think of this. It is easier to predict the orbital period of a planet in another star system 10 million years from now than it is for us to predict our own weather here on Earth just a month from today. Because in order for us to predict the weather long term, we would have to know the exact position and momentum of every molecule of air on the planet and how they interact with each other. For planetary orbits, it's just a lot easier, there's a lot less variables. Any university physics student could probably calculate it. As for the weather, a butterfly flapping its wings creates a minuscule and almost unnoticeable change in atmospheric pressure. But these changes compound over and over and over as time progresses, until, as widely known, the butterfly's wings cause a tornado in Texas. This inevitable growth of errors is called deterministic chaos, chaos that can be determined, measured. However, the butterfly itself cannot cause a tornado. The butterfly represents an unknowable quantity. We can never reverse engineer an event to find out what exactly tipped the system, there's just too many factors that could have gone into it. No choice you've ever made has been an isolated event. It's like a domino effect that keeps compounding over time. The world and society is like a network, and when a certain part of that network fails, it affects everything else. Chaos theory isn't random, even though it seems like it. To prove it, let's play chaos game. Take a piece of paper and make 3 points like such. We'll label them A, B, and C. Now, choose a random point in the middle of those 3 points. We'll just put it right here. Now, all you have to do is make a point halfway between your starting point and point A. From this point, make a point halfway between here and point B. Repeat the process for point C and continue this pattern, rotating between points A, B, and C. If you do this for long enough, you'll see something interesting start to happen. As more and more generations of these points are drawn, an image starts to emerge. From seemingly random points being drawn, from chaos, from disorder, this complex yet orderly figure shows its face. From drawing a few points and following certain rules, chaos can form order. It's a fractal, they're infinitely complex patterns that are self-similar across any scale. This shows that, with enough time, random actions can have serious long-term effects. The butterfly effect isn't exactly how you'd expect science to be. Physics, math, and many other scientific fields are based on predictability. You know, predicting the orbit of planets in order to send satellites and probes there, or predicting the odds of an asteroid hitting the Earth. The butterfly effect is the complete opposite. It's a model that exposes the flaws in other models. It says that without a perfect knowledge of initial conditions, any prediction is basically useless. But although the butterfly effect exposes flaws in other models, it also brings to light the impact that everything, including each of us, has. Jonas Salk is credited for having found the first vaccines for polio. Had he not discovered that at the time he did, the entire population of the planet today would be vastly different. Some people wouldn't have been born. Entire family lines may have been cut off due to the lack of a vaccine. Perhaps some of the largest companies today would not have been created if it weren't for this specific event happening at this specific time. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, a Russian nuclear-armed submarine was stationed off the coast of Cuba. American ships detected the submarine and began using depth charges to signal that the submarine should surface. The crew on board, though, took these depth charges to be bombs. The captain of the ship believed that war had broke out between the United States and the Soviet Union and ordered a nuclear torpedo to be sent immediately. Everyone agreed, except for one officer, Vasily Arkhipov. Without a unanimous vote, no action could be taken, and thus World War III was prevented. This one man's decision is the reason that the United States and Russia today aren't nuclear wastelands. The butterfly effect affects everything. Do you really have control of your life? Like, everything? No, but you and I have huge effects on the world as well. The butterfly effect is not to get leverage. It's not saying that every small thing always has a big impact. If that were true, then in a way you could manipulate it. Think of it like Jenga. You take away a certain block and things can be just fine. But another block, that one special block, if removed, causes everything else to fall apart. The reality is you have no idea what thing, or what block, will change your future. So everything has a say in it. For example, you watching this video will take up about 10 minutes of your day, whether it's for a good reason or not. Could me watching a movie, or listening to a song, getting a video idea from it, researching it, writing it, editing it, and uploading it to where you see it on your YouTube feed at a specific time prevent something bad from happening to you? Maybe you watching this video prevented you from going to the store 10 minutes early, where if you had left 10 minutes ago, a car that runs a red light would smash into you in an intersection, killing you. It's a scary thought, but it's a possibility. Someone recently messaged me and said that they had saw someone watching one of my videos in their classroom right next to them. They started to talk, become friends, and now they're dating. If YouTube wasn't a platform, if I hadn't had that specific video idea, that wouldn't have happened, and maybe those two people would have never met. But it goes much further than that. Everything has led you and I to this very moment, literally everything. Because the universe exists, because the universe is expanding, and because the temperature of the universe was just right to the point that stellar nurseries can form stars, without those stars, we wouldn't have supernovas. Without supernovas, we wouldn't have iron. Without iron, we couldn't exist. Every day you breathe, I hope, and when you exhale carbon dioxide. This carbon dioxide, through the help of plants and photosynthesis, creates more oxygen. Oxygen that people hundreds of years from now might breathe. Everything you do, no matter how small it is, will change the future in one way or another. People who lived hundreds of years ago have had an effect on the world as it is today. The things you do today will ripple throughout time. The small things you create today can be the big things that the next generation builds upon. In a way, you can live forever. So the next time something big happens in your life, just think, it didn't happen by accident.
I love a lot of things. Some people love sunshine and rainbows. Some love the warmth of summer and the chill of winter. Others love the smell of hot coffee in the morning and the coziness of their bed at night. Some love to travel and go on crazy adventures. According to the dictionary, love is a mix of emotions, behaviors, and beliefs associated with strong feelings of affection, protectiveness, warmth, and respect for a person, or a thing, or even an idea. But can we really define love? How do we explain a word that you can use to describe what you feel for everything, from people to cars to intangible ideas? To fully understand what love is, we have to look at the ancient Greeks. Instead of one all-encompassing word, the ancient Greeks used 7 different words to explain love in its many different forms. Eros, which means passionate love, is the most common type of love we see in our world today. It's fueled by a desire for pleasure. It's love at first sight, seeing someone's physical appearance and immediately getting attracted to them, even without knowing their first name. Most romantic relationships start like this. It's passionate. It can even be a bit obsessive. But love like this is confusing. It's the age-old question of love versus lust. Both lust and eros come with intense physical attraction and a strong desire to be close to the person, even if you just met them. Some people like to differentiate them by the length of time they stay around. If it was a fleeting emotion, it was lust. But then, if it lingered around like the best man at a wedding, then it was definitely love. But is that really true? And if it is, then is love simply lust that has stayed around for long enough? If lust simply becomes love, how long does it take for the switch to happen? At what point does lust become love? It's a complex question, and you don't normally give it much thought, so I'll do it for you. According to science and human biology, there are 3 stages to falling in love, and it all starts with stage 1, lust. It's driven by testosterone for men and estrogen in women. So when does lust become love? Well, that's stage 2. When we start feeling a sense of a high when we see them or speak to them or even just think about them. A high similar to the feeling you'd get from drugs or alcohol. When we start to feel a sense of euphoria when we're around them. When testosterone and estrogen are replaced by dopamine, making us happy and excited. Adrenaline triggering our fight or flight, and norepinephrine keeping us alert. This is why falling in love feels like an addictive rush, like you're driving at 120 miles per hour with no brakes in your car. Your palms are sweaty, your knees are weak, and your arms are heavy. Your heart is racing. Love is this feeling. Sometimes love doesn't start with lust. It starts with friendship. Knowing someone well enough that you can predict their reaction to every situation. Love is intimacy. It's authentic. It's kind. It's warm. It's encouraging. Love is the best friend you've known since you were a child. It's always wanting the best for the other person. Selfless goodwill. In today's world, philia is dying. We have millions of followers and subscribers, but very few friends. We have a multitude of people seeing the perfect view of our lives, everything we want them to see, but no one who is welcome to see what's behind the curtains. Philia is a sense of camaraderie. It's calling someone brother or sister, even when they're not related to you by blood. Love is loyalty, sacrifice, and vulnerability. Love is a choice. Love is not always serious. Love is not always permanent. And when it's fleeting, love is not always lust. Ludus describes a love that is built on infatuation, flirtation, and fun. Sometimes love is simply having a crush on someone and acting on it. It's going out for drinks with a friend and acting like a romantic couple for the night only. It's random kids pushing each other on swings in the playground, basking in that joy that their friends are having alongside them. It's going to the club and dancing with strangers, or singing karaoke in a room full of people you've just met. Sometimes love is casual, exciting, fun. It doesn't need any obligations or implications to be love. Love doesn't need physical attraction to be love. Love doesn't even need friendship to be love. Love simply is. We often say that love involves commitment, time, mutual trust, and acceptance between two people. But is that really the case? Because none of this exists between a mother and her child. But love does. The truth is that sometimes we can love someone even when we don't like them. If you have any siblings, I'm sure you'll understand the concept a lot. The Greeks called it storge, unconditional familial love. The kind of kinship love that only exists between family members. And of course, family does not mean you have to be tied by blood. Lifelong friends who become family, adopted children, step-parents, when we consider someone our family, we often develop a need to protect them, even when they might not be the nicest people to hang around with. Storage is a strange type of love. Most times when we love someone, we are drawn closer to them. We want to spend all of our free time with them, go on adventures with them, laugh, smile, cry, do everything with them. But sometimes love is wanting to go home, even when you might not talk to the people there very much. It's simply a sense of security, like a weighted blanket. This love is being able to give someone a kidney without hesitation, but not your phone's charger. Even when in truth, only one of those is easily replaceable. And this strange feeling is not only towards people, it's the same for sports teams and fans. Every year you cheer for your team, every year they break your heart. Yet the very next year, you glue back the millions of pieces and wear the badge with the pride chanting, "This year will be our year." Because love is unconditional. It's not dependent on who the person is or what they can give to you. Love is a one-way ticket. It's loving someone even when they might not have the ability to love you back. Aristotle once said, "All friendly feelings for others are an extension of a man's feelings for himself." If you don't love yourself, you can never truly love others. This is why Familial, the love of oneself, is something we shouldn't take for granted. Love is not just what you can do for others, it's also what you can do for you. So go out and give yourself a treat once in a while. You don't have to have achieved anything or crossed any milestone before you celebrate yourself. Just like others don't necessarily have to do anything before you love them, you don't either. Love is when you can stop comparing yourself to others, when you forgive yourself for your past mistakes and stop judging yourself for things that are beyond your control. Love is when you wake up in the morning, look in the mirror, and be proud of the person staring right back at you. Love is leaving toxic relationships and not feeling obligated to stay no matter who they are or how important they've been to you in the past. It's choosing yourself over and over again and protecting yourself the way you would protect anyone else. Love is being kind to yourself, in your thoughts, in your words, and in your actions. Because only when we truly love ourselves can we be able to love others. Love lasts for a lifetime. Love is to have and to hold, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part. Love is committed and compassionate. It's accepting each other's differences and learning to compromise. Love is taking out all the broken pieces and putting them together again, instead of throwing them all out. Love is everlasting, rooted in romantic feelings and compassion. So is love a feeling or a choice? If love is a choice, why do we never know we're falling in love with someone until we are? Why can't we ever say to ourselves, "I want to fall in love with this person," and just do it? On the other hand, if love is a feeling, then there is no basis for wedding vows. There is no basis for the promise that we'll love each other forever. Because feelings come and go, and usually they are beyond our control. The only way we can judge that love will remain forever is when we decide that it will. Is love a feeling or a choice? Well, it's both. Falling in love is a feeling, but staying in love is a decision. It's telling them you love them even on the worst days. It's saying to them, "I don't know how we'll get through this, except that it'll be together." Love is being vulnerable even when we don't feel like it. Love is holding the roses without being scared of getting pricked by its thorns. Love is an amazing feeling in the beginning, but for love to last a lifetime, it has to evolve into a commitment of never letting this person go for as long as they let you. Love is giving to charity and helping strangers in need. Love is empathy towards humanity. It's fighting for change even when you might not be directly affected by the issues. Love is altruistic, selflessly caring for humans, animals, and even Mother Earth itself. Love doesn't expect anything in return for its actions. Love itself is the reward. Love serves as the foundation for societies and communities, without which we cannot thrive. Scientists have always battled with the concept of love. Some believe that love is a basic human emotion, like anger or sadness or joy. However, some others believe that love is simply a cultural phenomenon, something we are drawn towards as a result of societal expectations and pressures. But nothing could be further from the truth. If love is simply a cultural phenomenon, it wouldn't exist in all cultures of the world, and the fact that it does suggests that, in truth, there is something innate about love, something biological about its experience. If love is fundamental to the human experience, then we must ask, what is the point of love? Why do we love? Is it for parents to be able to bear with their kids long enough for them to attain maturity? Or perhaps it's for mates to remain together for as long as is necessary to raise the next generation of humans. Does love exist to create a sense of community and camaraderie that is necessary for a herd community like ours to exist? We might never know why love exists or what ultimate purpose it serves, but we do know how important it is. The longest study on happiness showed that the people who end their life happy are not the ones who are the richest, or the ones who are the most healthy, or the ones who never made a mistake in their lives. The happiest people are those who are surrounded by the most love. Love from spouses, love from children and grandchildren, love from friends, love from religious organizations and communities. To fully understand just how important love is, we need to juxtapose its experience with the pain of loneliness. Not having that someone to share your inner monologue with because your thoughts are too petty or intense, random or full of anxiety, or too scary to share with just anyone. You can't rant, you can't scream, you can't fully express your feelings of obsession over your favorite passions, or rage about your most heartbreaking moments, constantly having to filter our thoughts through the lenses of politeness and political correctness, being looked at but not being seen, being heard but not being listened to. It's dreadful. We've all been there. If love is so important, why do we not make it the center of our lives? Why do we chase everything else, but to love we say, stop searching and it'll find you? You see, the truth is that love doesn't always find you, and sometimes you have to search it out. So to those chasing love, listen. In Plato's dialogue, The Symposium, Aristophanes the playwright explains love the way many of us chasing love think of it. In the beginning, humans were all androgynous, with double the parts we have now, including two faces turned in opposite directions. This physical form made humans so powerful that they became a threat to the gods. So Zeus cut them in two, one male and one female. And since every human has longed to be rejoined with their other half, like two pieces of a puzzle, two halves of a whole. Although this is just a myth, it opens up the curtain to why we love the way we do. We often fall in love with people who think would complete us, people who so perfectly fit together the pieces of our heart's puzzle, people who complement our shortcomings and give us hope for the things we are most insecure about. We love in part with the hope of completion. We all have a deep-rooted need to blossom, and we can only hope this person is the rain at the end of summer. But the truth is, we're already complete. In us are the two parts of a whole. So when people say, stop searching for love, don't take that as a message to stop trying. Take that as a lesson to stop searching for completion in another person. At the end of the day, only when you truly love yourself and completely understand the weight that carries, can you love others the way they deserve to be. It all starts, and it all ends, with you. Here is an apple, and here's a banana. Pick one. Whichever one you picked, it was your decision completely. This is what we call free will. It's the idea that we are the sole authors of our destiny, that in the face of multiple choices, whatever decision we make is completely down to us. We have the power of free choice. But what if I told you that free will is a myth? That we are all just a group of atoms who will react to a particular stimulus in a way that can be predetermined. If you picked a banana at the beginning of the video and we go back in time, if free will truly exists, you should be able to change your mind and pick the apple instead. But what if I told you that if we go back in time under the exact same circumstances, you'll pick the banana again? What if I told you that I can actually tell which of these two options you're going to pick 300 milliseconds before you actually pick it, with 100% accuracy? In the 1980s, Benjamin Libet, a physiologist, used an EEG, an electroencephalogram, to show that you can read and tell that somebody is about to move, 300 milliseconds before they decide in their conscious mind to actually move. This means that before we decide that we want to move our bodies, it's already been decided for us in our subconscious, and we only think that we made the decision ourselves after it's already been made. In a similar study, participants were asked to press one of the two buttons while looking at a clock with a random sequence of letters on a screen. With the use of fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging, they discovered that two of the participants' brain regions showed what button they would press 7 to 10 seconds before they consciously made that decision. The results of this research only proves one thing. A few seconds before you pick the banana or the apple, your brain makes that decision for you. It is after this decision has been made deep in your subconscious that your brain becomes aware of it, and we become convinced that we are in the process of making that decision. Because the brain is like the heart, we don't tell it what to do. It just does. So in reality, consciously making a decision, the experience we call free will, is actually an illusion. It's simply a visualization of events that the brain has already set in motion. It tells you what the brain has decided to do. For as long as society has existed, we've understood the role of surrounding influences on our decision making. With idioms like, "it takes a village to raise a child," and "you are the product of your environment," we understand that to a great extent, our upbringing, our parents, the society we grew up in, all of these influence our decision-making process. If someone is born religious, it's not crazy to think that they'll be religious throughout their lives. Taking it a step further, things like genetics also play a huge role in our choices. Charles Darwin, in the theory of evolution, brought forward the idea that if species do indeed evolve, then things like intelligence must be hereditary. Intelligence is a trait that helps us make better decisions. And while you can study hard to know more than the average person, for the most part, how intelligent you are is not entirely up to you. So, some people cannot make certain intelligent choices. Not because they don't want to, but because their genes are limited. In that instance, would you say that the person has the freedom to make those intelligent choices? Because in reality, they do not. Their fates are predetermined by their genes. How can we all truly have the freedom to decide our fate when we're not dealt equal cards from the start? And it's not just the cards we're dealt, it's also the ability to play those cards. Some are simply born better bluffers than others. When you look at the concept of free will critically, the whole idea seems to crumble pretty quickly. In fact, researchers have come to the conclusion that believing in free will is like believing in religion. Neither of them agree with the laws of physics. Think about it. If free will truly exists, and if choice is not just a chemical process, then why can things like alcohol and antipsychotics completely change a person's behavior? Even worse, we've seen brain tumors turn people from pediatricians to pedophiles. Domenico Mattiello was once a respected pediatrician. For 30 years, he was loved by his patients and adored by their parents and everyone in the society. In a shocking turn of events, however, in 2012, he began facing trial after being accused of making pedophilic advances towards his female patients. Neuroscientific research showed that Mattiello had a 4-inch tumor growing at the base of his brain that changed his behavior. In 2002, a similar thing happened to an American schoolteacher. He suddenly started having pedophilic urges towards his stepdaughter and was arrested. Then it was discovered that he had an egg-sized tumor growing in the part of his brain that was supposed to be responsible for decision-making. After the tumor got removed, the man's pedophilic urges stopped completely, and he was able to return to his family. If free will exists, why can removing a tumor change a person's choice? Is it then possible that by altering brain chemistry or physical composition, we can completely change a person's beliefs, ideologies, and choices without the person being able to do anything about it? In more recent years, lawyers have started using MRI scans to help plead the case of their clients. With neuroscientific research proving that brain tumors and malfunction cause them to commit their crimes, it's difficult to argue against it. Because if they did not have the freedom to choose to do something else, then why would you give them the heaviest punishment for actions they could do nothing about? Brian Dugan was facing execution in the state of Illinois after he pleaded guilty to murdering a 10-year-old girl. However, MRI scans revealed that he had mental malfunctions that affected his decision-making process. His lawyers pleaded with the court to spare him the capital punishment because, in reality, can we really say that it was his fault? If malfunctions in his brain caused him to do what he did, then he didn't have the free will to make a better decision. While he was on death row, his case continued to get argued, and as a result, the state of Illinois abolished capital punishment. Some scientists who still want to cling on to the idea of free will argue that, while it's true that the subconscious makes decisions for the conscious, we still have the free will to shape the unconscious world. And on first glance, this makes a lot of sense. You can read a book and an idea gets into your subconscious. Then, in the face of a choice, the idea you've read floats back out of your subconscious, forming your conscious decision. However, there's a flaw in that idea. It's much like a paradox, because where then does the desire to change your subconscious by reading a book come from? Desire, much like choice, comes from the subconscious. So a conscious effort to shape your subconscious is actually a subconscious effort to change your subconscious. The biggest obstacle the idea of free will, or lack thereof, faces is morality. If morality is based on free will, and free will doesn't exist, then what happens to morality? What happens to every other man-made institution that has been designed around the idea of free will? When faced with questions like these, many people immediately fall into a trap of fatalism. Fatalism is the idea that we are completely powerless in the universe's game. People who think like this believe that since we are not completely in charge of our destiny, we're completely at its mercy. It's random and not up to us. Then they become a lot less happy and start slacking in their relationships. They stop trying to be good people or uphold any moral standards, and overall they start to have a lower sense of fulfillment in life. But we don't have to fall into that trap. The scientists who champion the idea of the absence of free will would rather explain it philosophically as determinism rather than fatalism. Determinism is the idea that all events are predetermined by existing causes, that everything that will happen can be explained through the clockwork laws of cause and effect. It doesn't mean that we're completely powerless and simply at the mercy of what's to come. It simply gives us a different way to look at everything that happens around us. According to the government of the United Kingdom, more than half the people in prison have a brain injury. Doesn't that tell a scary story? Understanding the true concept of free will help us realize that those people are no different from us. They're not worse humans, and many times, they're just there because of a combination of bad events that were totally out of their control. In the same way, with deterministic thinking, we would also show more humility when talking about our achievements because now we understand that we are simply a product of our past experiences. It helps us to have empathy for people who are not in a similar position as we are, and it helps us to reduce our sense of entitlement. If the people in higher positions in society do not attribute all their success to their personal efforts alone, they're more likely to do more for others. They're more likely to help and to give back to others, hoping they might be able to recreate the factors that help them succeed. If you're getting scared or confused right now, I totally get it. Even the scientists who have been studying this for decades have found it very disturbing. It's a difficult thing to wrap your head around because it goes against everything society is built around. Free will is the basis of our society. It's what determines who is right and who is wrong, who gets the praise and who deserves to be punished. It tells us that a man who killed another man deserves to spend the rest of his life in prison, and that someone who works hard deserves to live a good life. And that's the fear of spreading the absence of free will message. Many scientists believe that if enough people are aware of this idea, it could literally end society as we know it. Because why would someone else risk his life to save another person if after he's done it, people will only say, well, he didn't decide himself to do it, so he doesn't deserve any praise. The reality is, praise and punishment are two huge factors that help influence our decisions. So if we remove them from our society, we pave the way for fewer good deeds and much worse ones. It's a strange dilemma to be in, because although the truth is that we do not have free will, believing that we do is actually a lot better for us. This is the concept of illusionism, that although free will is an illusion, it's one that we must keep up with, because faced with the choice between truth and good, it benefits the most of us to always choose good. So next time you see a homeless person down the street, don't just roll your eyes and judge the person. Understand that there are a multitude of factors, many of which they might not have been able to control that cause them to be where they are. Be humble about what you have and what you've achieved, because just a tiny less intelligence in your DNA, and you might not have made that one decision that changed your life. Know that you do not have free will, at least how you imagine it, and you're just lucky your mixture of atoms makes the right decisions. But immediately forget that. Forget everything I said for the past 10 minutes, and act like every decision is yours completely. Because only then will you be able to make the decisions that can truly change a life.
Some of them very likely have planets, and therefore I can imagine civilizations immensely beyond the capabilities of our own.
NASA just announced the discovery of 500 new planets. They're all orbiting other stars.
That's them, is it? It's odd on Earth, dude. But if there's another thing...
Our place in the universe is relatively quiet. We have an average star orbited by 8 planets, one of which contains us. For every grain of sand on Earth, there's 10,000 stars up in the sky. To be exact, sorta, there's between 10 to the 22 and 10 to the 24 total stars. Let's say that 5% of those stars are like our own sun. That leaves 500 billion sun-like stars. Alright, cool. So let's say that 1 in every 5 of those stars have a planet in the Goldilocks zone, a region around a star that can allow for liquid water, and life as we know it, to exist. That leaves 100 billion Earth-like planets out there. Okay, good. Out of these planets, let's say that 1% of them actually have life show up. Then, every single grain of sand on Earth would then represent an Earth-like exoplanet with potential life. Using this math, there's about 100 billion stars in the Milky Way, meaning that there's over 1 billion Earth-like planets in our galaxy alone. If 1% of those planets have life show up, then there's possibly between 100,000 and 1 million civilizations somewhere in our galaxy. SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, has been searching for these signals for decades. But out of all of these possible civilizations, we've heard back from exactly 0. So, where is everybody? The Fermi paradox addresses this exact question. If there's so many stars out there, if there's so many planets that are like Earth, why haven't we found them yet? Or why haven't they found us? Planets are actually really common in the universe. In just the past couple of years, our knowledge of habitable exoplanets, planets like Earth that exist outside of our solar system, have shot up drastically. We're now aware of around 3,800 exoplanets, some of which could possibly harbor life. The TRAPPIST-1 system is thought to have 7 habitable planets orbiting a star about the size of Jupiter. The worlds are rocky, they have water. Earth is just like them. Okay, so if there's all these planets like Earth that could have life, why hasn't at least one other civilization other than our own been detected? Even though we continue to search for life every day, we've been acting like it already exists for decades. For example, when we first went to the moon, the returning astronauts weren't able just to walk around and go to press conferences like they do today, but instead they were locked in quarantine for weeks. Why? Well, it was assumed that if there was life on the moon, not developed life, but bacteria and microbes, then that could pose a serious threat to life back home and potentially wipe us off the face of the Earth. Seriously. It was a serious enough issue and concern that the practice was continued throughout the Apollo program up until Apollo 15, when we realized we were okay. But that doesn't account for humans contaminating other moons or planets. There's quite literally thousands of pounds of junk just lying around on the moon. Although it's unlikely, it is possible that there could be bacteria on those objects that may be able to live under those circumstances, and we may have provided the moon its first life forms. The reason why we send satellites into the atmospheres of planets to burn up after we're done with them is for this exact reason, to prevent us from spreading ourselves places we shouldn't be. As bad as it sounds, every prediction we've ever made about the universe in the past has ended up being wrong in some way or another. There's been about 100 billion people throughout the entirety of humanity's existence. Almost all of them died without knowing what the planets actually were, what the universe is or was. 99% of all species on Earth have died already. Are we gonna be the next one? Hundreds of years ago, we believed in a geocentric theory and thought that everything in the universe revolved around us. We believed the Earth was flat, but today we obviously know these things are the furthest from the truth. So based on our track record, it would be dumb to assume that we're the only life in the universe. Frank Drake thought the same thing. He thought, there's absolutely no way we're alone in the universe. There must be a way to calculate where everyone is, right? And from that simple question, we now have what is known as the Drake equation.
Discovery Houston, 20 seconds to Roger, 0G, I feel fine. Capsule is turning around.
The Drake equation breaks down all the necessary steps and requirements for a civilization to exist and thrive on a galactic level, allowing for us to detect them. It breaks down the search step by step, and at the end, we're left with the number of civilizations out there, waiting to be found. This is the Drake equation. In a single line, 7 variables, when multiplied together, give us a way of measuring how many possible civilizations could exist in our galaxy at this very instant. It's an actual way of calculating what we did at the start of the video, and there's terms for each step. It's a little daunting, but I'll break it down. N is the number of civilizations in our galaxy that we have a chance of talking to. This is what we're trying to figure out. Our star is the average rate of star formation in our galaxy. Now, we don't know the exact number of stars that form every year, but we do know the amount of solar masses that form every year. It's about 3. So every year, about 3 average-sized stars form. Luckily, our sun is a pretty average star, so it's a good way to view it. It could be one huge star or 10 smaller stars. We don't know for sure, but this term in the equation is the one that we're the most certain of. F sub p is the fraction of those stars that have planets. This number isn't certain, but some people have estimated that it's somewhere between 10 and 50%. Not super accurate, but it's a start. N sub e is the average number of planets that could potentially support life. So first we find the stars, second we find the planets, third we find the planets out of those that could support life. As I said at the start of the video, about 1 in every 5 stars have a planet in the habitable zone, so this is pretty certain as well. F sub L is where things start to get a little bit messy. F sub L is the fraction of planets that actually develop life at some point. Our data on life is really small, and by really small I mean us. We have 1 planet's worth of information on life out of the billions of planets out there in the sky. We're just going off the data that we have, but what if extraterrestrial life doesn't function even close to the way that we do? It's possible, and I think quite likely, that life beyond Earth doesn't always need water or oxygen or sunlight at all. They don't have to function the way humans do. There's trillions of planets in the universe with trillions of different living conditions, so it's only fair to assume that there's possibly trillions of circumstances that allow alien beings to survive. So F sub L is hard to determine. F sub I is the fraction of planets with life that can actually form civilizations like we have. Again, our data is limited to us and only us. Something I really think about a lot is, if we live on such an average planet in an average galaxy around an average star, how did we get so lucky to be the only life to exist? If everything else around us is average, why did the anomaly known as life pop up here? Or maybe life in general isn't an anomaly, but just intelligent life is. Life that is able to ask the kind of questions like, are we alone? Out of all the species on Earth, us humans are the only ones who have developed language. Alien methods of communication might not even be imaginable by us. They might not even have language or gather information visually or through the senses that we have, or even have any way of conveying things to species other than its own. It's like humans trying to understand and speak whale. I don't know how to, and I don't know anyone else that does. The same logic may apply to extraterrestrial beings and how they communicate. How many other life forms on Earth actually have verbal means of communication other than us? When we discover ancient languages, we have ways to decipher them. We have ways to make connections to other languages. We know how sentences are structured in various ways. With alien languages, there's nothing to refer to. We can refer to our own languages, sure, but cross-referencing entire civilizations on opposite ends of the galaxy with our own human language seems counterintuitive. F sub c is the fraction of civilizations that develop technology that can be detected. We, again, are the only examples of this. Let's say the Earth was created 1 year ago. Humans would then only be about 10 minutes old. The Industrial Revolution would have happened only 2 seconds ago. For the majority of human history, we have had literally 0 ways to even consider contacting alien life. It's a very, very recent thing. We've been broadcasting radio waves into space for the past 100 years, but humanity has been around for as long as 1 million years. Out of our entire existence, only 0.0001% of that time have we even been able to conceivably contact aliens. Also keep in mind, radio waves are the only way that we've tried so far. In 100 or 200 years, we may find another way of contacting extraterrestrial life that could work millions of times better than radio waves. This could also be a reason why we haven't heard anything back. It would be like trying to talk to someone across the world via carrier pigeon while everyone else is using the internet. You would just look stupid. See, we expect all civilizations to be using the same kind of technology that we do. The only problem is we're either A, the first to get technology of our scale, or B, we've fallen behind and everyone else ahead of us is only getting more and more advanced. However, if they are able to detect our radio waves, they may have already found them.
Discovery's 4 computers now have primary control of critical vehicle functions.
See, the last term in the Drake equation is L. It tells us how long a civilization lasts. It represents how long we have to be found before it's too late. Extraterrestrial civilizations may send out signals for a long time until they stop, or destroy themselves, or find a better way to live, a life in a simulation perhaps. The longer L is, the more advanced the civilization becomes. The Kardashev scale comes in handy here. I made an entire video on this topic, it's really bad, but I'll explain the important parts here. First, a civilization needs to find a way to take over its planet. This is called a Type 1 civilization. We are on our way there, we're at about 0.72 at the moment. A Type 2 civilization is capable of harnessing the power of its entire host star. See, the further away you are from a star, the less energy you get from it. Earth only gets maybe 1/1000% of the sun's energy at any moment. Many structures have been proposed to somehow harness the sun's energy, but we won't be there for a very, very long time. The third stage for a civilization is, you guessed it, a Type 3 civilization. This civilization has conquered the galaxy and has access to any and every planet. But from our knowledge, there isn't even one of those civilizations out there that are detectable, and that doesn't make sense. See, the universe is 13.8 billion years old. Earth has only been around for maybe a third of that. There's been at least 5 billion years prior to Earth coming into existence that could allow for civilizations to have risen and also fallen. But yet, we see nothing. If you could build a device, a huge ship, that could travel at 10% the speed of light, you could cross the galaxy in 600,000 years. I know, it sounds like a long time, but in comparison to the Milky Way's at least 10 billion year old age, 600,000 years is literally nothing. All it takes is for one species to do this, and they could cover the entire galaxy. So if it's that easy, why haven't we seen it yet? Well, it might be a good thing, because that would mean that the Great Filter is in front of us. There may be other life in the universe, but there's barriers that we all have to overcome. The Great Filter theory helps explain this very well. Imagine that there's 1 million civilizations in the Milky Way galaxy, but not all of them can thrive to the point that they take over the galaxy. There's barriers in the way. These barriers are things that new life forms and civilizations must overcome. The first barrier might be multicellular life, and maybe that's an easy barrier to cross. Okay, next barrier. The ability to have thoughts and a consciousness. Next, maybe we have to understand basic technology. Okay, that's fine, we're good at that. Next, discover time travel. Okay, not so easy. We're kinda stuck. See, there's things that prevent us from progressing, moving forward and becoming a galactic civilization, but we don't know what those things are. There's hundreds of billions of planets in the Milky Way, but when we look for other life, there's nothing. Where's it all at? Well, the Great Filter theory shows that there's certain steps that the species must get past in order to take over their planet, solar system, galaxy, and so on, just like the Kardashev scale suggests. One, or perhaps multiple of these filters are extremely hard, or maybe impossible to get past. The question is, have we already gotten past that barrier, or does it lie in front of us? If it's behind us, then good. We've passed a nearly impossible step in building a civilization, and we may be one of, or even the first advanced civilization in the universe. If it's ahead of us, then we have our work cut out for us. For the majority of human history, the planet's fate was up to events that humans couldn't control. For example, large asteroids that wiped the planet of its inhabitants. But today, actually only in the past 80 years, we've developed technology capable of ending human civilization at a moment's notice. We're working on AGI that will then lead to superintelligent AI. These could be some of the barriers we must get past, and it may be where many civilizations fail. If we find an advanced civilization that has died in the process of advancing, then the Great Filter is in front of us, and this isn't good. The Great Filter is a challenge that wipes out almost every species that encounters it. It's not just one that kills off 99% of a population. That would give them a chance to regrow and reconquer that barrier. This would kill 100% of every civilization that has ever existed, and leave no chance for repairs. As with many other things that people believe to be stronger than them, things like superintelligent AI or aliens, many people tend to fear them. Historically, whenever a stronger species or civilization, or, for the future's sake, technology arose, it almost always resulted in the weaker party being wiped out. For example, humans and Neanderthals, or more recently, the discovery of North America. Perhaps this is only human nature, but based off of what we know from the past, first contact with aliens might be the most dangerous thing humanity has ever faced. A really important question arises here. If we do hear from or detect another civilization, should we let them know that we heard it? The futurist half of me says yes, of course, but the other half of me says maybe not. This could be exactly what alien civilizations are doing right now. It's possible that they have detected us already, but instead of responding, they're observing and patiently waiting. Advanced alien species may just be observing us to see how we progress. Consider us a science experiment, but on a potentially galactic scale. I touched on this in my AI video, but I'll bring it up again here. When you're building or observing something or someone who could be multiple times more powerful than you are, you need to be careful. You want to observe and keep a close eye on how it progresses. AI could help us colonize the galaxy and meet other life forms, but it could also cause the extinction of our species. What happens if superintelligent AI sees extraterrestrial life as a threat and makes attempts to take it out? It'll probably fail, and that is one of the worst scenarios for us. One of our own creations, perhaps our best creation, is the cause for the extinction of our species. But with the case of AI that we're developing on our own planet, if it gets too powerful, we'd just shut it off, right? Type 3 civilizations may be doing the same thing with us. They may be observing us to see how other life in the universe becomes powerful, and if we eventually get to that tipping point, whatever it may be, they may decide to put an end to their experiment. It sounds insane, but we do that here on Earth. There are parts of Earth that we could inhabit, but we don't just because it isn't convenient for us. Prime example, Antarctica. It's an entire continent that we don't colonize because it isn't convenient. It's frozen and just not super suitable for life. This could be how alien civilizations view Earth. They may have found us, realized that we aren't special at all, and moved on. For all we know, we may have already been visited by aliens, just not recently. With all the time before Earth's formation that may have allowed civilizations to form, there's a chance that one or maybe multiple of those civilizations have stumbled upon Earth during its infancy, when there was no life to be found. Modern humans have only been around for maybe 50,000 to 100,000 years. 100,000 years out of 4.5 billion is practically nothing. In an entire galaxy, there's bound to be places that just aren't worth colonizing. Why waste time and resources on colonizing a planet that won't benefit you in any way? Aliens wouldn't come to Earth without a reason, whether it's good or bad. Drake's equation is just that, an equation. The terms, mostly the last four, are educated guesses at best. That's all you can really do when trying to answer a question of this magnitude. There could be many, many more civilizations than we think. Or maybe we're the only one. If any of the values in Drake's equation end up being 0, that's it. We're alone. There's been many calculations made with the Drake equation, and it all comes down to how pessimistic or optimistic you are about the future. There have been calculations as high as a couple million civilizations in our galaxy, and there have been calculations that say we're alone. And at the moment, they both hold value. Enrico Fermi did ask one of the most important questions humans have ever asked, but at the same time, Fermi was also a pioneer in the creation of nuclear weapons. The species that could inhabit the entire galaxy is also the same species that stands capable of almost completely wiping itself out at a moment's notice. We search every day for signals from other civilizations. We look for techno-signatures, signs of engineering, of things that just don't commonly appear in nature, like city lights from space. We search for those in other corners of the galaxy. We study biosignatures in the atmospheres of exoplanets to find elements that may show that life could exist. We sent out radio waves hoping to find aliens. In 1974, Frank Drake himself sent out the Arecibo message, the M13 star cluster. It's a string of information describing humanity in hopes that someone, or something, would find it. We send out satellites such as the Voyager crafts, with specific instructions of who we are, what we are, and where we are. We're doing all we can to find alien life, while also giving them all the information they need to find us. We want so badly not to be the only ones in the universe that we don't even consider the possible consequences of us not being alone. Are we done, or are we just getting started? I guess the better question is, are we closer to the beginning or the end of human existence?
There's only a finite amount of space on Earth for life, and there's only one place we can go. Either way, the clock is ticking down. Time is against us, and I don't want to be around to see what happens when that clock hits 0.
You've probably heard of the trolley problem, especially if you're at all interested in philosophy or ethics. Lately, it's been a subject of